Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 6. 9 Stances Versus. Sharingan. Naruto. Where are you? Who are you looking for? Asked a figure as he emerged from behind the entrance door. He was wearing a standard Konoha Anbu mask with a weasel design printed on it. Sarutobi Hijiran spun around and did a double take. What are you doing here? You can't be seen here. Wait, you're too short to be, Itachi. Catching his tongue before it slipped, the aged Kage quickly took a deep breath to compose himself. I'm too old for this, he muttered. Remove that mask, Naruto. Slowly, the infamous spiky blonde hair, whiskered birthmarks, and foxy grin emerged from behind the weasel mask. Once his face was completely revealed, the 8-year-old's grin vanished as he said, "We need to talk." That we will, sighed Sarutobi, beginning to show signs of wearing down, but it's already way past your bedtime. How about you, Asuma, and I meet first thing in the morning? I have important things I need to discuss with you both anyway. Okay, but you'll have to hear this tonight. You won't believe whom I bumped into on my way here from my old apartment. Naruto, please, I really am tired. Tomorrow, Hijiran said with a small yawn. Now that he was sure his adoptive grandson was okay, the events of the long day were beginning to catch up with him. He was so eager for bed, in fact, that it was easy to assume that the weasel mask was just another of Naruto's pranks. A certain acquaintance of ours who gave me this mask as a parting gift, continued Naruto, ignoring the old man's pleading. Hijiran's exhaustion left him instantly. Without another word he closed the door, locked it, and then cast a small jutsu to ensure their privacy. Then he sat next to his adoptive grandson on the bed and said, "Tell me exactly what happened." Flashback. Once he made eye contact with the stranger, Naruto found himself in his mindscape standing before the nine-tailed demon. This was Naruto's first time seeing Kyuubi in her full fear-inspiring gargantuan body. However, he did not have time to register his fear as he sensed the presence of another. The Jinchuriki did not understand how a stranger he bumped into could invade his mind, but he immediately readied himself for combat. Formulating a sword with his mind, Naruto grabbed firmly onto the newly materialized object and charged towards the stranger. Only to come to a screeching halt as the stranger brought up his hand and signaled for him to stop. Lesson number 1. It's very foolish to charge at someone blindly without knowing their skill level or whether they are friend or foe, admonished the intruder with an obviously faked voice. Naruto nodded like a student would when he was agreeing with an instructor. Heeding the older male's advice, Naruto calmed down and assessed the mysterious person standing before him. The intruder stood almost 2 heads taller than Naruto. He wore the standard Konoha Anbu attire, with a katana strapped behind him, though he was missing the mask that Anbu always wore. His relatively young-looking face could not hide the maturing effects of having seen and performed many killings. With practiced ease, the intruder unsheathed his katana to match Naruto's sword. "It appears someone has taught you how to hold a sword," teased the intruder. "But from the look of things, that person wasn't a very good sensei." Kyuubi roared from within her cage in response to the insult. Her anger shook the entire mindscape. "You leave her alone," demanded the self-appointed guardian of Kyuubi. Unconsciously positioning himself between the intruder and the cage, Naruto said, "Leave my mind now, or you'll be sorry." Rather protective, aren't we?" Pausing to observe reactions his offhanded comment garnered, the intruder continued on with his goading, "I guess you'll just have to make me." Unlike the previous mindscape experience, Kyuubi had not channeled chi. Without the positive effects of chi, Naruto easily allowed his emotions to get the best of him. The Biju vessel charged forward while performing a sloppy sword thrust. Capitalizing on Naruto's haste, the Anbu-clothed stranger grabbed and twisted Naruto's right wrist to loosen his sword grip. Once the sword left contact with Naruto's grip, it vanished into non-existence. With ease, the stranger tossed Naruto against the bars of Kyuubi's cage. The young man's eyes betrayed his disappointment and annoyance at Naruto's childish attempt. Lesson number 2. Never lose control of your emotions, ever. As if on cue, Kyuubi chimed in from behind bars. "Remember what I've taught you. Let your sword art do the talking. This is your mindscape. You cannot lose, though you never know against a Sharingan user." An Uchiha. Sharingan, questioned Naruto. I don't know what that is, but it won't matter much. My 9 stances are undefeatable. I even beat 5 of you. A surprised look appeared on the Uchiha's face. Don't be too cocky, brat, retorted Kyuubi with a small snarl. She might want her vessel to become the strongest shinobi ever, but she was not willing to admit being bested by a human, a child no less. I was training you, not giving you a beating. My doppelgangers took it easy on you. They didn't exploit any of your numerous openings. You are facing a real opponent now, and you have to take it seriously. What the fox demon did not disclose to Naruto was that she and her doppelgangers had held back only in the beginning of their spar. Once Naruto took to the 9 stances, he was able to overcome his opponents on his own, using his mastery of the sword art. Naruto looked down at his empty hand and watched as a sword materialized in it once more. Staring down at his reflection as it looked back at him from within the shiny blade, he tried to recall his months of mindscape training with Kyuubi that he'd gone through the previous night. Suddenly, the words of the swordsman's 4 decrees echoed within his mindscape. A swordsman is his sword. A sword is its wielder. A swordsman and his sword are one. A swordsman and his sword are none. With a burst of speed, Naruto appeared suddenly in front of the Uchiha. After his humiliating defeat in the spar with Asuma, Naruto was eager to fight again in his mindscape, where his rules reigned supreme. Here, his smaller stature and weaker physique did not matter, as long as his imagination could compensate for those handicaps. The Kyuubi vessel utilized the first 2 of the 9 stances, the composite stance and the sword-conquering stance, aiming one of their variations at the intruder's right eye. When the Uchiha raised his katana to parry away Naruto's sword, the blonde twisted his wrist, avoiding a clashing of weapons, and aimed his sword at the intruder's heart. Using another hand holding the sheath to his katana, the Uchiha swung it over to deflect Naruto's second aim, only for Naruto to change aim again, causing his sheath to strike air. Shock registered on his face as he saw Naruto's sword inching toward his right eye again. This time, because of his current awkward position caused by overbalancing himself from both misses, he had no way of defending himself. Having no choice but to leap backwards to avoid the blonde's deadly aim, the Uchiha activated his Sharingan in midair, and upon landing, he leapt forward into the fight again while making continuous offensive slices with his katana at a blinding speed. The mantra of the 4 decrees commenced chanting its second cycle, the echoes resonating off the walls in Naruto's mindscape. Naruto launched a forward stab at his opponent's left kidney before he landed and disrupted the Uchiha's barrage of offensive slices. Unable to sidestep the younger fighter's attack midair, the older fighter brought his katana down to deflect the incoming attack and hit air. The more experienced fighter tried 5 more times to complete his offensive strikes. In each attempt, the Sharingan wielder had to recall his katana from completing the offensive attack so it could defend against the faster and more lethal stabs of the blue-eyed boy. Finally the Uchiha landed from his leap. Swordsman. Once his feet found ground, the Uchiha rolled to his right to avoid another of Naruto's lethal attacks. After 3 more failed attempts in executing an offense against the younger fighter, the Uchiha was forced to totally abandon all pretense of offense and focus solely on defending himself against the unpredictable and deadly strikes of the Kyuubi vessel. While it was true that a Sharingan user was able to see things in slow motion and allow its wielder longer reaction time, it could only predict movement when chakra was involved and when the opponent mentally projected his attacks. Most fighters mentally pictured their attacks before executing them, but the mental projections could only be read by the Sharingan through eye contact. Furthermore, they gathered chakra to the muscles needed to perform the attacks. For example, an increase in chakra concentration in the thigh and calf muscles indicated the fighter's intent to jump. Thus came to light one of the weaknesses of the Sharingan, its dependency on reading the opponent's chakra. If the opponent was able to mask his chakra, or to purposely gather chakra elsewhere in his body, he could mislead the Sharingan into anticipating a non-existing attack. Is his. Lesson number 1. Said Naruto with a smirk, while imitating the intruder's faked voice. It's very foolish to charge at someone blindly without knowing their skill level. His pride slightly wounded at having his snide comment thrown back at his face by an 8-year-old, the intruder charged again and said in the same phony monotone, "Playtime's over, you little runt." Sword. A sword is its wielder. 6 quick exchanges were made. The lonesome hermit of the 9 stances, however, did not have the Sharingan nor did he care about chakra. He focused on kung fu and the basics of the human anatomy, the one thing that no fighter could mask, body language. And body language gave away a fighter's intent. For example, the slight tightening of the calf and thigh muscles gave away the fighter's intent to jump or kick. It did not matter if or where the fighter gathered chakra, his muscles must prepare in a certain way before performing the jump. The students of the 9 stances learned the intricacies of the human anatomy so they could, among other things, anticipate and counter their opponent's every move. Swordsman. 5 more attempts at wounding his opponent were dodged, and Naruto found the elusive Uchiha annoyingly fast and nimble. Even though he had an inkling that this intruder was not there to harm him or his prisoner, Naruto was not going to let up his attacks until he found more to his theory than just gut feelings. To the Uchiha's dismay, Naruto's 9 stances were quite formidable. The younger boy easily had the upper hand against the older, more experienced, and nearly twice as tall fighter. The older fighter was at his wits' end about what to do. With only a limited supply of chakra, he could only last a few more minutes in Naruto's mindscape. And he needed all the time he could get, considering that he still had a message to deliver. And his lesson number 2, Naruto said in a mocking mimicry of the intruder's annoying voice as he sent another stab towards his opponent's face, never lose control of your emotions, ever. Throughout this whole exchange, Kyuubi had a bystander's objective view of the sparring. It was abundantly clear to her that the 9 stances were superior in every way to whatever ninja skills Itachi could throw against Naruto. Kyuubi knew full well that Itachi was severely handicapped by his inability to use ninjutsus and genjutsus in Naruto's mindscape. So the eventual outcome of this sparring match would not prove Naruto stronger than Itachi. Rather, it would prove again the supremacy of the 9 stances over any form of weaponry techniques. As she continued to watch Naruto's creative utilization of the 9 stances, she recalled what she read from the manuscript about the lonesome hermit, the originator of the 9 stances. When the student of the 9 stances gained complete mastery over his sword art, he became just like the lonesome hermit, unbeatable in any weapon-to-weapon and hand-to-hand battles. So far, the only obstacles preventing Naruto from complete mastery in the physical world were his inadequacies in speed and strength, both of which he would grow out of. However, in his mindscape, those obstacles mattered not. In his mindscape, Naruto had complete mastery over the sword art known as the 9 lonesome stances. Sworder 1. A swordsman and his opponent twisted away from the thrust and barely was able to parry the follow-up. He clearly needed to get some space from the blonde, but Naruto wouldn't give him the breathing room to do it. After dodging 3 other near misses, with the last one being too close to his groin for comfort, the Uchiha jumped back twice, collected himself, held up his right hand, and used his real voice to shout, "Stop Naruto-kun, Kyuubi, tell him who I am." Sword or none. Why, after all those earlier comments you made about me and my charge, why should I not let you get a beating? Upon hearing the playful tone in the fox's voice and recognizing the familiar voice of the boy before him, the echoing chant of the swordsman's 4 decrees stopped. "Kyuubi-sensei," Naruto called out, turning his head slightly so he could look over his shoulder at the cage behind him while his opponent remained in his peripheral vision. He did not lower his sword just yet. "Who is this guy? Is he who I think he is, or is he the guy you want me to kill?" The whiskered blonde finally realized the difference between a student-sensei sparring match and a full-fledged fight. Before him stood possibly the most dangerous man alive, if he was the Uchiha Madara, who was powerful enough to manipulate the 9-tailed demon. All the suffering he had gone through, all of the villagers' hatred that came from the loss of their loved ones during Kyuubi's attack, the loss of Naruto's chance to know his own parents as other kids knew theirs, and the loss of what would have been his normal childhood innocence, all of it came together to fill Naruto with overflowing righteous fury. He was ready to execute justice. All he needed was the go-ahead from Kyuubi. "Relax, Naruto. He's not Madara." Those simple words set off 2 sighs of relief. Naruto, for not having to kill yet, and the other, for not having to dodge the boy's deadly and unpredictable attacks again. "But he is an Uchiha. Uchiha Itachi," Kyuubi explained gently. Naruto's eyes widened. "Weasel-san is Itachi, the traitor." Flashback interrupted. "Itachi," exclaimed Sarutobi as he interrupted the narrative. "Don't worry," reassured Naruto. Weasel-san told me about his secret mission, and I don't hate you for doing what needed to be done. You don't think it was cruel and uncalled for? Inquired the worried Cage. A lot of people would have gotten killed if you didn't do it, right? Naruto replied. And it's not like you wanted anyone who wasn't a ninja to get killed. That was Danzo and Madara's fault. Sarutobi frowned. Madara, I thought Itachi was working with a missing nin called the Masked Shadow. Naruto shrugged and nodded. Same guy. Kami. Sarutobi whispered under his breath, his wrinkled face openly displaying his shock. Naruto shook his head vigorously, his little blonde locks whipping back and forth. You haven't heard anything yet, he said as he continued his story. Flashback resumed. So do you understand why I had to do what I did last night? Asked Itachi after he had explained his Anbu identity, his real purpose of visiting Naruto the night before the massacre, the mission he was ordered to do, and the complications of adding the Masked Shadow, Madara, into the mix. Naruto nodded and said, yeah, Weasel-san, I can understand why you had to kill the bad guys, but why did you team up with the worst bad guy of them all? He bit his lip and swallowed hard as he waited for the information, and his stomach, to settle. Unsure of the reason behind his nervousness, Naruto unknowingly tightened his sword grip. He tried to will himself to do what was necessary should Itachi admit to being the traitor everyone thought he was. Simple, answered Itachi. Someone needs to spy on him, and I'm no longer welcome in Konoha anyway. Of course the former Anbu captain noticed the sudden tightening of the blonde's sword grip. This only brought a smile to his face as he saw in him a glimpse of his former privately hired sensei, Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto wanted to ask him more about the mission, but decided against it. A brief awkward silence followed. Finally, Kyuubi broke silence and asked the obvious question. If you are here, wouldn't Madara know you're missing and get suspicious? I'm not really here, answered Itachi. Seeing the puzzled look on their faces, he continued, I'm really a Kage Bunshin that was made in secret last night before the real me left with Madara. My time is limited by what little chakra I have left. I came to deliver a message to the Sandame, but neither he nor I can afford for us to be seen together. Instead, you are going to be my messenger. Itachi already used more chakra than he had expected to in his spar with Naruto. Flashback interrupted. A message for me, exclaimed Hijiran, interrupting Naruto once more. Gigi, shouted one exasperated 8-year-old. If you interrupt again, I won't continue anymore. Sheesh, you're beginning to sound like Konohamaru, teased the adoptive grandfather. Jii, I'm not doing it anymore, said Naruto with a childish pout, inwardly enjoying the brief light moment that interrupted the serious narrative. Yeah, just like Konohamaru. Okay, sorry, if you continue, I'll buy you lunch at Ichiraku's tomorrow. Flashback resumed. Remember this Naruto-kun, continued Itachi, deliver this message only to the Sandame. You are not to mention to anyone else this message or that you've seen me in this village. If you did, the village will brand you a traitor without giving you a chance to defend yourself, and because of your special condition, people will demand your blood for what happened to the Uchiha clan. Okay, I'm ready, Itachi began. Good, now look into my eyes. I'm going to seal this message into your memory with my Sharingan. My time is very limited now. Focusing his cerulean blue eyes into Itachi's red Tomod eyes, Naruto heard Itachi's voice burned into his memory. Hokage-sama, Danzo has made some questionable decisions since his contact with the Masked Shadow last month. For one, he had some of his root agent infiltrate Anbu as his spies. Secondly, he made no plan of complying with your order to disband Root. He is not to be trusted anymore. Please keep an eye on him. Uchiha Madara is not dead. He is the famed missing nin, the Masked Shadow. He is powerful and very dangerous, especially to Konoha, whom he carries a grudge against. Also he seemed to want my brother Sasuke for his own. I can't completely confirm this, but the evidence favors my suspicions. He tricked my little brother into believing that I was the only one there last night by using a powerful Sharingan genjutsu called Tsukuyomi. The genjutsu spell took place in Sasuke's mind where Madara had total control over what Sasuke experienced in the technique's make-believe world. There he also told Sasuke to kill his best friend to get the most powerful Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan. I'm not quite sure why he sowed the seeds of hatred into Sasuke. I'm beginning to see how manipulative and conniving he is. No wonder he was able to trick the Kyuubi and used Tsukuyomi on her to force her to attack Konoha. A low rumble echoed in Kyuubi's chest as she did her best to suppress the growl that begged for release. She would have scolded the Uchiha for bringing up that unpleasant memory, but decided against doing so since the Kage Bunshin had nearly depleted its chakra. Of course, Kyuubi's slight reaction was not recorded into Naruto's memory, as the only voice heard by him while under the influence of the Sharingan was Itachi's. The recording continued in Naruto's mind. Madara is gathering missing nins to form a secret organization called Akatsuki. He needs 10 members, and so far he has 5, including myself. Your wayward student, Orochimaru, is among the 5. I'm not exactly sure what Madara plans to do with the Akatsuki. Whatever it is, it can't be good. The night of the massacre, Madara was at the Uchiha compound, searching for 2 manuscripts. I believe they are the ones I gave Naruto-kun 2 nights ago. Currently they are in the safekeeping of the Kyuubi. I think Madara fears the powerful techniques they contain. Somehow he can sense their presence if Naruto-kun was to unseal them from his mindscape. Please help him develop his mastery of the techniques described in them to his full potential. Whatever you do, don't have Naruto-kun take them out of his mindscape yet, at least not until he has mastered them and becomes strong enough to defeat Madara. At this point, the Bunshin started to flicker in and out of existence. Sensing his low chakra reserves, the clone ceased chakra flow to his Sharingan. Reaching into his attire, he pulled out his Anbu mask that his real self left behind before leaving with Madara and tossed it to Naruto. Naruto-kun, here, a parting present to prove to Hokage-sama that you've talked to me. Train hard and grow stronger to protect everyone. Watch out for my little brother. Don't worry, Weasel-san, promised Naruto as he caught the mask. I won't let you down. Then he was forced out of his mindscape to see the stranger in front of him vanish in a cloud of smoke. End flashback. Naruto, that's a lot to take in, even for me. How do you feel about all this? Asked Hijiran once he was sure Naruto had finished relaying Itachi's message. I don't know, Gigi, answered the exhausted blonde with evident anxiety and frustration in his voice. Life keeps getting weirder and weirder. First, I'm the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Kitsune. Then, I'm Kyuubi's Avenger. And now Itachi expects me to keep Madara from getting his hands on those manuscripts. I'm never going to be a normal little boy, am I? Grandson, I believe you were destined for greatness the day you were born. You inherited the potential for greatness from your parents. It is in your blood. When he said this, the grandfather lifted his grandson and placed him on his lap. Embracing Naruto in a hug, Sarutobi rocked him as he said soothingly, "Don't worry. Even if the sky falls down, Asuma and I will be there to hold it up for you. No matter what lies in your future, we will be right there with you." Slowly the anxiety-filled boy melted into his grandfather's embrace. A moment later, he was asleep. Seeing his adoptive grandson had fallen asleep in his arms, Hijiran placed Naruto in his bed and tucked him in. Before leaving the sleeping boy, the Hokage made a mental note to ask him about the manuscripts after they had their meeting with Asuma. 0.0. The next morning found Asuma and his father in Naruto's room behind a privacy jutsu, barring their confidential meeting from prying eyes and ears. After a brief conversation about how Naruto had slept his first night in his new home and how he felt about his room, the newly reinstalled Junin turned the conversation towards a topic he thought his son would be more excited to talk about. "So, Naruto," Asuma said as he leaned casually against the wall of the room, "tell me why you want me to train you." "I want to grow stronger," replied Naruto with a frown, thinking the answer was obvious. "Why do you want to grow stronger?" inquired the Sandaime. "If I'm stronger, I can become the Hokage, and the villagers will respect me," answered the whiskered blonde. The two men were silent for a moment, giving Naruto a breather. Then, Asuma asked, "What if the villagers never accept you? What if you never become the Hokage?" "Nani? Dad, why couldn't I become the Hokage?" asked the depressed boy. Looking down, he asked, "Is it because of what's inside of me?" "Naruto, because of what's inside of you, you are a hero to Konoha. So, of course you can be Hokage. I'll make sure of it," reassured the Sandaime. Then, he explained, Asuma asked those questions to let you know that those are not good enough reasons to get stronger and train harder. They aren't. The spiky-haired blonde asked with a frown. Then what would be a good reason? The will of fire, answered the professor. The will of fire, repeated Naruto this unusual phrase. It is the spirit of Konoha's past, present, and future. The will of fire shines brightly in the examples of the previous Hokages and in the spirit of the ninjas who sacrificed their lives for the good of the village and the protection of their precious people. Every day in this village the will of fire is passed on from the older generation to the younger, from the Junins to the Genins, and from the instructors to the students. Like Konohamaru, you too will inherit our will of fire, explained the professor with a gentle smile. Really? Naruto asked. He suddenly felt a little more proud of his place in this new family. Not only was he now a son and a grandson, but he was also the person to whom they would pass something exceedingly precious, if he understood the Sandaime correctly. Naruto, when I train you, I want you to remember that you are getting stronger, not for the selfish greed for power, Asuma said in a solemn voice, but for your desire to better protect the village and your precious people. As I warned those of this clan who chose the way of ninja before you, I now state the same warning to you. If at any time I sense that you have become bent on greed for power, I will personally end your career as a ninja, declared Sarutobi in all seriousness. Being a part of this household affords you free access to our voluminous clan library of ninja techniques, and I can't allow such power to be abused. I understand, Gigi, answered Naruto. I will find my precious people in this village, and I will grow stronger to protect them and the village. I'll be stronger than all the previous Hokages. I'll protect everyone with my life. 0.0. 0.0. In an apartment a few blocks away from the Sarutobi compound sat two kunoichis eating breakfast. Today was Anko's turn to cook and Kurenai's to do the dishes. Anko made scrambled eggs and dango. As they ate, Kurenai vented her frustration to her friend about discovering Asuma to be the pervert at the hot springs 2 years ago. I don't think I can ever forgive Asuma for that, said the crimson-eyed genjutsu mistress who still could not get over having her trust betrayed by her former teammate. Being somewhat of a sadist, Anko had a simple and, to her anyway, natural suggestion to help her friend feel better. Let's treat him to our pervert humiliation special, she said with a wicked smile. We could let Yugo in on it as well, since she was equally a victim in that incident. Still hung up on feeling betrayed, Kurenai picked up her dining knife and shouted, "Ugh! That bastard! Let's castrate him!" Whoa, sister, hold on, said Anko, looking a little uncharacteristically nervous. You may never forgive him, but that doesn't mean I won't. Who knows? Those family jewels might come in handy in the future. The last few words were said a little quieter, almost under Anko's breath. They were so out of character with the normally sadistic kunoichi that they caused Kurenai to look up sharply. Her red eyes stared at her friend until Anko blushed and looked away. Kurenai smirked and rolled her eyes. So I was right, you have the hots for him. Hey, let's not jump to conclusions, the snake mistress snorted. Then, she added with a note of loneliness, you know me and the men I dated, they all turned out to be one-night stands. They all wanted the same things, but just not the most important thing, me. Well, those scumbags weren't good enough for you anyway, comforted the wavy brunette. You're better off without them. Lowering her head to break eye contact, Anko said the next words with faint resentment, one not unnoticed by her roommate. If you still have feelings for that smoke monkey, I'll try to flirt less around him. I do still have a reputation to keep, you know. We aren't like that anymore, Kurenai replied softly. He and I can never be. It pained her to have to bury the feelings that she'd long had for Asuma, but she knew it was necessary. The hot spring incident affected her more than it did Anko or Yugo because Asuma was her teammate at the time. She had trusted him with her life and more. Him being a drunk and a pervert notwithstanding, she would have forgiven him if he had remained and confessed to her, instead of running away and hiding. She might even have let him off if he'd simply come to her after he'd sobered up and explained what happened. She used to think that he had left for such a long mission without saying goodbye because he did not want to deal with her feelings for him, that somehow she was not good enough for him. Knowing the real reason behind his 2-year hiatus only made her feel worse. It would have been easy for their long-standing friendship to grow into something more, but his cowardice cost them any chance of happiness together. I think eventually I'll forgive him, but I'll probably never trust him again. If you want him, he's yours. Both kunoichis knew that without trust, no relationship could ever work. This was especially true for ninja couples who might be separated for weeks, if not months, at a time, depending on the length of their missions. Plus, Kurenai was not one to stand in the way of her friend's potential happiness. This was doubly true for Anko, who hid her loneliness behind her sadistic flirts and promiscuous lifestyle. If Anko fell for Asuma and he was able to get her to drop her mask, Kurenai would do everything that a good friend could for the two of them to have a chance at love and happiness. Are you sure, Rumi? Asked Anko, barely able to contain her eagerness. Yeah, answered Kurenai with a sigh. By the way, what do you see in him anyway? I'm not sure yet, replied Anko, taking a thoughtful bite of her dango. All I know is that he's not like anyone I've ever met before. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. In Naruto's room sat the three regulars engaging in a lively conversation about his training regiment. Sarutobi ordered Naruto and Asuma to keep Kyuubi's involvement a secret, including Naruto publicly addressing Kyuubi as a sensei. He would provide Naruto training on seals and chakra manipulations. Due to his village duties severely limiting his time, however, Sarutobi's training would mostly involve him directing Naruto in his self-study. He would pick out the right sequence of scrolls for Naruto to study on his own and answer any questions the boy might have as he went through them. On the other hand, Asuma would be doing more of the hands-on training in taijutsu, genjutsu, and ninjutsu. Asuma was no expert in genjutsu, but he had picked up a few tricks from Kurenai over the years. During the discussion, Asuma recommended weights to Naruto for strength training and morning jogs to increase endurance. The next day, Naruto would be attending the academy with children his age. Many of them had already started their attendance 2 years before him, at the age of 6. Naruto would have a lot of catching up to do. As soon as their discussion was over, Asuma planned to show the spiky-haired blonde how to mold chakra. I'm sorry Asuma, but can your training with Naruto wait until the afternoon? Asked Sarutobi. I have a few things I need to discuss with Naruto alone. Sure Dad. Once Asuma left the room, Sarutobi reapplied the privacy jutsu and asked his adoptive grandson, tell me everything you know about those 2 manuscripts. Actually I don't know a whole lot, but I'm sure Kyuubi-sensei does, replied Naruto. I think she probably had to at least read through them to pick which one to teach me first. I wish you have those cool red eyes like Itachi. Then, you can join me and Kyuubi in my mindscape. Sarutobi was quiet for a moment with a thoughtful expression on his face. Then his eyes lit up, and a small smile spread across his face. I believe I have an idea that might work, even without the Sharingan. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Leaving the Sarutobi compound, Asuma walked with a lit cigarette in his mouth. He looked to catch up with his longtime friend Kakashi. Though he was a year younger than Asuma, Kakashi had outranked him almost from the very beginning of their friendship, having swiftly advanced through the ninja ranks under the tutelage of 2 legends of Konoha, the Yellow Flash and the White Fang. It wasn't just the quality of training, however, that sped the silver-haired ninja through the ranks. Kakashi had something to prove. He wanted to earn back the honor lost by his father's decision to save his teammates in lieu of completing the mission, the honor of being a Hitaki. Asuma, on the other hand, had suffered the dwarfing pressure of being under the towering shadow of his father, who was known by the nicknames, God of the Shinobi, and the Professor. While he had access to the village's most coveted and comprehensive library of ninja techniques that his clan had collected over the years, Asuma had led a sheltered life and had no real motivation to train hard or advance quickly in rank. That was not to say he had not become strong in his own right under the guidance of his father. He was simply not as motivated as Kakashi was to announce his worth as a ninja to the world. It seemed unlikely that 2 such different men would form such a close friendship, but differences didn't matter much when they were working together to complete difficult and dangerous missions. In fact, their differences had led to them developing skills which actually complemented each other, leading to many successful missions that might otherwise have ended in disaster. After years of such missions, they were closer than brothers in every way that mattered. Each would willingly give of his life to save the other. As he continued on his journey to the Anbu headquarters, he noticed a familiar pervert basher sitting in a dango shop with her back toward him. He quickened his pace slightly in hopes of passing the kunoichi before getting caught. Tish, Suma-kun, I'm offended that you think I wouldn't be able to detect you walking behind me, chided Anko without bothering to turn around to face her crush, especially since you are the only ninja in Konoha that smokes that brand of minty cigarette. Suma-kun, asked the bearded Junin. Though completely clueless about Anko's feelings for him, he could not help but blush slightly on hearing her nickname for him. Why don't you come and join me? Offered Anko as she turned to wink at him while suggestively patting the stool next to her. Asuma took a deep drag on his cigarette and then flicked it away as he walked toward the dango shop. He was unsure why everything Anko did quickened his heartbeat. Her smile, her wink, the way she patted the stool with her slender fingers, the way her back moved when she turned to him. Not even his former teammate Kurenai had such an effect on him. Perhaps it was because he had been deprived of any female contact for 2 years in the Guardian Monastery. Perhaps Anko was putting on her seductive charms as a way of payback for the hot springs incident. Perhaps Asuma was developing a feeling for the exotic beauty. Perhaps, the possibilities were too many. It would be too bothersome for Asuma to figure out why. He would rather just go with the flow, the way he had been doing all his life. Asuma ended up passing time with Anko until he had to meet up with his adoptive son. Though both revealed little of themselves to each other, both had thoroughly enjoyed chatting casually and being in the other's company. The bearded Junin had forgotten about wanting to catch up with his old friend. 0.0. The feline-masked ninja remained hidden in the tree as he watched the raven-haired boy clean up the desecrated grounds of what used to be one of the strongest clans in Konoha. It had been 2 days since the Uchiha massacre. Even though the Anbu had gone through it to properly dispose of the dead bodies and D-ranked missions had assisted in cleaning the place, the sole Uchiha survivor still found himself with a lot of work to do. Throughout the morning, the top student of the Ninja Academy had yet to notice the spying nin, who remained hidden until he chose to make his presence known. Sume and her 2 children, Hana and Kiba, made their way toward the Uchiha compound. During the previous night's council meeting, Sume and Danzo were each given permission to present their offer to Sasuke. After explaining what they were offering him and why, they were to give Sasuke the rest of the day to think before announcing his decision before the council. The Inuzuka clan head decided that she would approach Sasuke first. Finally reaching the once heavily guarded entrance of the Uchiha compound, Sume announced their presence and entered with her children in tow. Glad to be interrupted from the monotony of cleaning and the morbid thoughts of why the chores needed to be done, Sasuke rushed to greet his first visitors since that fateful night and was pleasantly surprised to find his fellow classmate Kiba, a tiny puppy in his hands, standing beside his mother and sister. After bowing to Sume, Sasuke addressed her in honorifics befitting of a clan head. You do not need to be so formal, Sasuke-kun, reassured Kiba's mother. A mere, Sume, will do. By the way, I've heard that you've discharged yourself from the hospital. Yes, Sume-san, replied Sasuke, choosing not to explain that he had left because he found hospital rooms overwhelmingly morbid and sterile. Would you like to follow me to the dojo room? Sume-san is still too formal for my taste. We'll just have to work on that, commented Sume. Nani, remarked Sasuke, confused as to the meaning behind the dog tamer's words. Don't worry, I'll explain everything in due time, Sume said with a kind smile. Just lead the way. Once they were inside the dojo room, they all sat on the mats, Sasuke on one side, the Inuzukas on the other. After a few exchanged pleasantries, Sume explained the council's decision to the 8-year-old. Nani, you still want to adopt me even though you'll give up the right to have the Sharingan added to your clan's bloodline? Asked a puzzled raven-haired boy. What's in it for you then? HMPH, remarked Hana with a smirk. Don't think too highly of your Sharingan, or too lowly of human nature. We Inuzukas are loyal to AT, and it's in our blood to care for those strayed. Listen, shouted Sasuke, I don't need your pity. Besides, I heard that there's another, stray, in the village you can adopt. No adults seem to want their kids near him. Why don't you go practice your charity there? That's enough, Sasuke, rebuked Sume with a motherly authority. Don't take offense in the term, strayed. We use it quite often in our dealing with our companions, our dogs. I assure you that the term is not meant to be demeaning when we use it." She paused as to think of an answer for his question concerning the infamous orphan. Fortunately her daughter replied for her. "We would have adopted Naruto if it wasn't for a few of my dogs. For some reason, they couldn't get along with him and we didn't want to bring him into our family if we couldn't make him feel completely comfortable." "Fine, but that still doesn't explain why you want to adopt me," Sasuke replied with a shake of his head. "Your dogs might like me better, or whatever, but you're still just getting stuck with someone like." His voice trailed off as he tried to think of the right words to describe himself, but the only thing his thoughts managed to produce was a lump in his throat that he couldn't quite swallow. "I'm not doing this because I pity you," said Sum soothingly. "I want you to be a part of my family because I don't believe that anyone should be alone. We will always treat you with love, respect, and kindness. You will never have to be alone again, Sasuke-kun." "I want to believe it," whispered Sasuke while tears that welled up in his eyes. He started to cry uncontrollably, hissing in between breath, as he said the next words. "I want to believe you, but I don't know how to forget. I don't want to move on and be part of a new family. I miss my old family." Sum stood, crossed the space between them, and then sat directly in front of Sasuke, gently putting a hand on his shoulder and looking him in the eyes. "Sasuke-kun, I know that we can never replace your family. I'm not here to be a replacement for your mother. I just want the opportunity to help you heal and eventually learn to move on with your life. I don't want you to force yourself to forget the painful tragedy, nor do I want that pain to dominate you for the rest of your life. I want to help you treasure the good memory you had with your old family while making new ones together." She waited to see if he would respond or ask another question and then added, "Just think about it, okay? Meanwhile, I'll leave your present here with you," said Kiba as he too stood and approached Sasuke. He gave the puppy that had been resting peacefully in his arms an affectionate scratch behind the ears and then held it out to Sasuke. The puppy and Sasuke bonded like long-lost friends. The former wagged its tail playfully while licking the dark-haired boy's cheek. The latter found himself unable to hold in a small, almost reluctant, giggle at the puppy's antics. It seemed like Hana still knew how to pick them after all. "You'll need this," Hana said as she handed him a basket full of puppy food and other puppy care items. To the lonely boy who just lost his family, what he wanted and needed the most was what the Inuzukas were offering him. Just when Sasuke was about to agree on being adopted by Sum, the woman raised her hand to interrupt. "Fair's fair. You must hear Danzu's proposal first before making a decision." Though she knew that was the right thing to do, she got the feeling that she would regret later for not accepting his answer right away. The feline masked ninja spied on their conversation from his concealed location. He was raised from birth not to have any emotions. However, listening to the Inuzuka matriarch's moving conversation made him wonder how he would turn out if he was extended such an offer, instead of the root regiment. Still, if his master's theory on the Uchiha was true, his offer for the boy to attain power would be hard for him to resist. Though the root branch was officially disbanded by the Hokage, Danzo was not going to cast off the blood and sweat he poured into his pet project without a fight. The old war hawk had deliberately withheld his punishment from his subordinates. None of them knew of his demotion from the advisor position or of the order to disband Root. Hokage or not, Danzo would be damned if he was to comply with the senile old fool's demands. As the Inuzukas bid their goodbyes, Sum turned her head toward the concealed Root Nin and said, "You can come out now. Remember to play fair like we did." Sasuke followed Sum's gaze and saw a masked ninja jump down from the tree branch on which he'd been standing. Slowly and as non-threatening as possible, the masked nin walked towards the raven-haired boy. "He was here all this time, and I didn't even notice. Could this Danzo guy be my ticket to gain the power I need to kill my brother?" As he was thinking this, Sasuke clutched the puppy in his arms a little tighter, seeking comfort in its company. The masked ninja stopped when he was a few feet in front of the massacre survivor. No words were exchanged as none were needed. Sasuke led him back to the same dojo room. "Could you please remove your mask?" asked Sasuke once they were behind the privacy of the doors of the dojo room. "I'm afraid that would not be possible," replied the root agent. My identity needs to remain a secret at the moment. Should you accept my master's offer, however, I will become your private instructor. Only then will I remove my mask if you still remain curious. Who is your master, and what is his offer? Asked Sasuke, whose interest was clearly piqued by the mystery surrounding the ninja and whoever that sent him. My master is Danzo-sama, explained the masked ninja. He serves as one of the personal advisors to the Hokage and is the leader of a special division in Anbu called Root. After pausing slightly for that information to sink in, he continued, Danzo-sama would like you to enroll in the Root training program. Technically, on paper and as far as how Danzo had been presenting the idea to the Hokage, the advisors and the council, Danzo was another option for Sasuke to be adopted. The council as a whole never approved enrolling Sasuke into Root, and the Hokage had dismissed that idea outright, in no uncertain terms. The only way for Danzo to enroll Sasuke was to adopt him as a son, at least on paper. Danzo planned to turn Sasuke into a weapon of Root under the guise of the adoption. Sasuke was silent for a moment, thinking over the differences between the two meetings. With Sume, he had received warmth, compassion, and a range of other human emotions, but most importantly, he'd been given comfort. With Danzo's agent, however, everything was cold, lifeless, and all business. There was something else more important that Sasuke noticed about this Root agent. He carried himself like someone who was powerful and had been so for so long that he was as used to it as he was to breathing. It reminded him a little of the way Itachi had carried himself. Tell me more about the Root training. 0.0. When Naruto arrived at the Sarutobi training ground, he found his adoptive father already there sitting in the lotus position meditating with his eyes closed. Sneaking up to him, Naruto waved his left hand in front of Asuma's face and got no reaction. Putting on his prankster cap, the 8-year-old carefully slipped his adoptive father's cigarette pack out of his Junin vest and proceeded to walk away to find a hiding place for it. Naruto, stop right there, said Asuma without opening his eyes or changing the expression on his face. Okay, Chimchim-san, you've caught me, admitted Naruto as he stopped briefly from advancing away. I've told you not to call me that, said Asuma with a tick mark on his face. But that's what Doggy-san called you, said Naruto, slowly inching away. It had been too long since Naruto pulled his last prank, well, too long for Naruto anyway. Asuma didn't miss the movement. Naruto, give me back my cigarettes, he shouted as he rose to his feet to chase after him. You'll have to catch me first, said the laughing blonde as he sped off across the Sarutobi compound, bring a smile to faces of those who saw their chase. Besides, you'll live longer without them and have more money to buy me ramen. Naruto. 0.0. At the appointed meeting time, Sasuke appeared before the Hokage, his two advisors, Danzo and Sume. In his arms was the little puppy, which he named Shame, for its playful disposition. Sasuke, I've heard that you've been approached by Sume and Danzo and have been made aware of their offer to you. Is that correct? Asked the Sandaime as he smiled inwardly at seeing how Sasuke bonded with his new companion. Hijirin hoped the raven-haired boy would make the right choice. Yes, Hokage-sama. The 5 members before him leaned in and awaited his answer. So, what is your decision? Asked Sume, anxious for his response. I choose both. 0.0. There was also a lot that I needed to cover this chapter before I time skipped to the next, Genin exam. So did you get it all? Itachi was the stranger Naruto bumped into. Kushina was Itachi's private sensei. Naruto could defeat anyone that appeared in his mindscape as long as they were not another master of the 9 stances. Anko and Asuma had a first unofficial date. The Inuzukas gave Sasuke a dog. Sarutobi was able to talk to the Kyuubi somehow and learned about the manuscripts, though it was only implied in the story. Madara wanted the manuscripts for himself and could somehow sense their aura, which had become undetectable when sealed in Naruto's mindscape. Sasuke chose both Inuzuka and Danzo. Chapter 7. Genin exam. Time skip. 4 years later. Sarutobi Naruto. That was the name he wanted to be called. However, both his father and grandfather denied him of his wish. They insisted on him keeping his given name, saying that it would pave way for claiming his true heritage in the near future. Nevertheless, Naruto was insistent on adding the name Sarutobi in one form or another. As the villager certified prank master from hell, Naruto was a force to be reckoned with when he wanted to be. When he really wanted something, his persistence coupled with his unpredictable pranks made him quite persuasive. Uzumaki Naruto Sarutobi, that became his new name. As he continued towards the classroom, he was forced to pass through a slew of spit wads. Though the disgusting projectiles were numerous, traveling at speeds only possible when aided by chakra, and randomly crisscrossing trajectories, Naruto navigated through them as if they were frozen in mid-fight. Rounding the corner into the next hallway, Naruto nimbly spun to his left, sidestepped someone who was not paying attention to where he was running to, and coincidentally caught a fellow classmate who was falling toward his spin after she had tripped over her own books. He had caught her and held her in his arms and would not have wanted it any other way. Her serene, pale lavender eyes stared into his cerulean blue ones, completely mesmerized by them. For that brief moment, her universe was at peace. And so was his. Hinata Heim. Alas, her peace was interrupted. Her beautiful porcelain face suddenly turned crimson red. Her calm, regal Hyuga composition melted under the intense heat that erupted within her body. Hinata Heim, are you all right? Asked Naruto, clueless as ever. Why do you suddenly feel like you're burning up? If you're too hot, I could help you take off your jacket. Do you want that? Naruto-kun, she managed to will herself into saying before she fainted. Her satisfied smile continued to enhance her already beautiful face. Unsure of what exactly happened or what else to do about it, the blonde made a cage bunchen to carry their books while his original self picked up the blue-haired girl bridal style and carried her with him to class. Boss, you shouldn't strain yourself, the clone offered a little too innocently. Here, let me carry her, and you can carry the much lighter books. Shut up before I use you as a practice target for kunai throwing training with Anko. Naruto hissed. Sometimes it was frustrating to have to ward off his clones who also shared the same desires as his original self. Ha, Kit, spoke a voice in his mind, admit it, you enjoy being near her, inhaling her intoxicating aroma. She's almost ready. In a few years. Shut up, Naruto, who are you talking to? The blonde boy raised his head towards the new voice. Uruka-sensei, I. The boss was talking to me, Uruka-sensei, said the clone behind him, rescuing the original from answering the awkward question. All right, Naruto, you know how I don't like you showing off in front of your peers. Sorry, sensei, but I thought for the genin exam, we'll all be making bunchins, so it's not like I'm doing something we shouldn't already know. Well, Bunshin no Jutsu is one of the techniques you'll be tested on, but nobody else's clones can carry books. Okay, sensei, since my arms are a little occupied, would you mind carrying those books once I dispel my clone? In his 4 years in the Ninja Academy, Uruka-sensei was the only teacher who took a personal interest in Naruto. That was perhaps because the Chunin instructor had a similar background as the blonde boy when he was younger. As an orphan himself, a young Uruka had desperately sought attention and acknowledgement from people around him. Or perhaps taking a personal interest in his students was just Uruka's constitution. In Naruto's eyes, it was a trait that put him in a league above the other academy teachers. The scene Uruka saw before him could only be described as adorable. All right, Naruto, let's get to class so you can put Hinata down, Uruka teased with a wink. Should we take the direct route or the scenic route? Uruka-sensei, Naruto shouted while trying to hide his grin and blush. When they entered the class, Uruka noticed that it was quieter than usual. Perhaps the students were nervous about their exam. Ino Pig, it's my turn to sit next to Naruto-kun. You've had him all week. No, that was just wishful thinking on Uruka's part. It turned out to be another normal day at the Ninja Academy. Forehead, this is the last day of class. It would be more of a hassle to change seats than to stay put. Besides, you get to sit next to Sasuke-kun. So why are you complaining? Ino Pig, that's beside the point. Rules are rules. You get Sasuke-kun today, and Naruto-kun is mine. Troublesome, said the scrawny pineapple-haired boy who was just awoken from his nap by the two fangirl banshees. Shut up, Shikamaru, shouted the boy-crazed rivals in unison. Actually, girls, interrupted Naruto, coming from behind them toward his regular seat. "If it's okay with you, I want Hinata-chan to sit next to me today. She fainted again, and I think it's probably my fault, so I want to make sure she's okay." Naruto was the kind of person that would go out of his way to make people happy. When he had first met Ino and Sakura, he found them fighting over who should sit next to Sasuke. The blonde boy told the girls that they did not have to ruin their friendship over something as insignificant as where they got to sit. Naruto assumed that they must have been fighting because they did not want to sit alone. He told them that they should each take a turn sitting next to Sasuke, and the one that did not get to sit with the Uchiha could sit with him. For reasons incomprehensible to Naruto, both girls' faces turned red, just like Hinata's did whenever he so much as glanced at her. Apparently, when others were not greeted by his pre-adoption messy and smelly self, they saw and were attracted to the real him, a kind and gentle soul. During the last 4 years since his adoption, Naruto was not sure why girls acted that way around him or how to react to all this unfamiliar but pleasant attention. Maybe Dad had been right about the importance of hygiene. Since that fateful day when Asuma burned his orange jumpsuits, taught him proper hygiene, and bought him a whole new ninja wardrobe 4 years ago, he had been receiving these same weird looks from girls close to his age. "Well, actually, the reason Hinata, That's fine, Naruto-kun," interrupted Sakura while her hand covered Ino's mouth. "We'll find our own seats somewhere else." Turning her attention to her platinum blonde friend when they distanced themselves somewhat from Naruto, she removed her hand and said, "Where would that leave us once he finds out about Hinata's crush on him?" Ooh, her former best friend had always been a little slower than she was. "You know, Ino, you were right," stated Sakura with a sly grin. "I should just stay with Sasuke-kun today since it's the last day. Like you've said, it would be more of a hassle to change seats now, especially since Iruka-sensei's already here. I'm glad you are seeing things my way." "Hey, wait a minute, Sakura." Sasuke, who was sitting in a chair next to the two standing girls, tuned out the rest of their conversation. His eyes glanced over to his blonde classmate seated before while his hands busied themselves petting his dog, Chame. Petting Chame had long since become his habit when he observed people or became lost in thought. Naruto was an enigma to him. There seemed to be more to his blonde classmate than what met the eyes. Why do the adults hate him? How much of his skills is he really hiding? What's with that sword he has strapped on his back? If he knows how to use a sword, how come he never uses it when we spar? His thoughts were interrupted by his adoptive brother, Inuzuka Kiba. "Sasuke, you shouldn't be looking at another boy like that," teased Kiba, trying to withhold his snickers. "Shut up, mud boy, or I'll turn you into a pincushion in our next kunai throwing practice." "Hey, I'm not the only mud boy here," Kiba shouted back in defense. Shino turned his head toward Kiba when he heard his remark. Because of his raised collar, dark shades and stoic demeanor, no one could see Shino's face to read exactly what he was thinking. However, Iruka believed that he was sighing at Kiba's stupidity in substantiating the "mud boy" insult. The door opened, and in walked Mizuki-sensei. With the arrival of the second instructor, the class could finally begin. Unlike most mornings, Iruka did not have to use the head expansion no jutsu to settle the class down. The classroom had suddenly become eerily silent, each student waiting to take his or her genin exam. "We'll be calling the names out alphabetically. When I call your name, please follow me to another room to take your exam. The rest of you remain quiet in this room while you wait for your turn. Any rowdiness could be grounds for your immediate failure." Both the Uchiha and the Uzumaki boys sighed at the same time and buried their faces into their palms. Their names were among the last ones on the list. This day was going to be such a waste of time for them. They both wished that they could be using this time more wisely in training or studying instead of staring at the clock until their names got called. First up, Aburame Shino. 0.0, 0.0, oh. The Sandaime donned on his Hokage robe and stood proudly overlooking the balcony of the Hokage Tower. His wrinkled right hand steadied the pipe in his mouth as his left lit it with a weak fire jutsu. A gently breeze washed over him, wrapped his smoke briefly around him, and dispersed it into nothingness. His thoughts wandered to the day Sasuke walked into his office 4 years ago. The Uchiha boy's words, Words that in some ways still shook the council today, remained vivid in his memory. I choose, both. Both. The Sandaime had questioned at the time. Why would Sasuke choose to be adopted by two different families? Unless, Danzo, he must have wanted to use the guise of adoption to enroll Sasuke into Root and had never presented to Sasuke the adoption aspect of things in effort to appeal to the boy's desire for power. How could he have not foreseen this in the council meeting? Perhaps he was overly concerned with the matter of presenting before the council Asuma's adoption of Naruto. Since the council had approved both Danzo and Sum and had further stipulated that they were to honor Sasuke's choice, Sarutobi had no choice but to allow a shared custody between Sum and Danzo. It was times like those that Sarutobi wished he still had Itachi serving him. Sarutobi had not forgotten Itachi's warnings about Danzo, his message vividly etched in his mind. He had some of his Root agent infiltrate Anbu as his spies. He made no plan of complying with your order to disband Root. He is not to be trusted anymore. Please keep an eye on him. And kept his eyes on him he had. Sarutobi was able to weed out most of the Root spies in Anbu. Those whose loyalty he was unsure of were assigned missions and duties that would not lead to a compromise in the safety of the village or undermine his authority or credibility as the Hokage. The Hokage was not so naive as to think that he had covered all bases and had unearthed Danzo's entire spy network. As a precautionary, he also assigned a few of his most trusted Anbu to spy on Danzo. There were some suspicious and questionable activities, such as private meetings with former Root agents and frequent purchases of expensive jewelry, but nothing definitively incriminating, though Sarutobi did note how some clan heads easily sided with Danzo on issues he had strong opinions on. The Cold War between Sarutobi and Danzo, all of their moves and countermoves, occurred behind scenes without the knowledge of the clan heads or the villagers. In many ways, both got what they had wanted. The Warhawk got his war, and the pacifist got his peace. Stuck in the middle of all the politics and maneuvering was Sasuke, who had certainly turned out to be an interesting kid. 12 years old and already a low Chunin level, or at least that was what he was leading people to believe. Sarutobi suspected his skills to be at least mid or high Chunin. After all, his older brother Itachi made Anbu captain at the tender age of 13. Under the strict training Danzo's Root offered, who was to say how strong Sasuke could become? However, his skills were not what Sarutobi found interesting about the Uchiha survivor. It was his appearance of being a jovial, carefree 12-year-old who enjoyed training with Kiba, with his dog Chaim, and on occasions with Naruto. Sarutobi hoped that what he saw in Sasuke on those rare sparring matches with Naruto, the occasional darkening of his countenance when Naruto had let slip a hint of his true skills, was just a figment of his imagination, but inwardly he knew otherwise. Damn you, Danzo. Sasuke was someone dear to Itachi. Watching over Sasuke, Itachi's beloved little brother, was the only thing he ever asked for in return for his loyal service to Konoha, performed at a great cost to himself. 4 years ago, Itachi had performed the greatest act of loyalty to Konoha, that of eliminating traitors who also happened to be his clan members. Not only that, but he also delivered valuable information about a new threat to Konoha, Madara and his organization, Akatsuki. Additionally, he had done something more for his now adopted grandson. He had stolen 2 powerful kung fu manuscripts and given them to the boy, though that may have had more to do with paying back the debt he felt he owed Uzumaki Kushina. Ah, Naruto. Sarutobi's thoughts brightened slightly when they wandered onto his adoptive grandson. Naruto had been a breath of fresh air to the Sarutobi clan. His harmless, but quite embarrassing, and usually hilarious, pranks brought an unmistakable energy and life back to the clan that had grown too serious to enjoy the finer things in life, especially since the Sandaime's inauguration. Naruto's cousin, Konohamaru, certainly enjoyed having Naruto as a ni-san. Sarutobi could not imagine what his and Asuma's lives would be like now without the sun-kissed blonde. He supposed the same fondness for Naruto could be said of Asuma's romantic interest, Anko, who had been seen together with Asuma whenever they did not have missions outside of the village. Naruto and Anko, the 2 village pariahs, had hit it off instantly when they first met. They easily detected the figurative mask they each donned on in front of others and the desire to be acknowledged for who they were instead of being labeled due to things they had no control over. Anko often had a hand in Naruto's sword training, provided him with a sparring partner whose movement could be almost as unpredictable as Naruto could be using the 9 stances. Their other deviant, training sessions, consisted of Anko using Naruto as target practice. Naruto was to dodge Anko's barrage of kunais, senbons, and shurikens as nimbly as he could, while remaining in the circle drawn around him. Once Naruto was able to dodge all of Anko's weapons, some of his mid-air twists were simply so incredible that one would need to see him perform them to believe she had him catch her weapons, instead of dodging them. Sarutobi remembered one of those rare occasions that he had an afternoon off from his village duties. He had with him another set of scrolls on seals and chakra manipulation. At that time, Naruto was doing a lot of reading, delving into the theories of the hows and whys of seal and chakra techniques. Sarutobi firmly believed that his adoptive grandson would one day surpass the Yondaime, his biological father, a once-in-a-million genius. Naruto's studies in seals and chakra theories, starting at such a young age, would pave way for him to continue Minato's legacy, become a seal master and a jutsu inventor sans parallel. When Sarutobi had arrived to the training ground, he had been shocked by the sight that greeted him. Naruto was catching Anko's kunai while struggling to remain in the circle. His movements were swift and graceful, though only a shadow of what he was capable of doing in his mindscape. The movements were, however, definite derivatives of the 9 stances. It seemed to Sarutobi that Naruto was subconsciously incorporating his understanding of the 9 stances into everything he was learning. A year ago, Sarutobi had asked Anko about her opinion of Naruto's progress, of which she was more than just impressed. Anko was one of the few people with whom Naruto dropped his mask. The others were Sarutobi and Asuma. Therefore, Sarutobi knew that Anko's assessment of his grandson would be as close to Naruto's then true abilities as anyone was able to give. A low to mid chunin was where she assessed him at. Naruto was barely 11 at the time. Every time he thought of Anko, Sarutobi could not help but feel guilty for somehow having failed her. Of course, he had never failed her as the Hokage by purposely sending her to suicide missions, despite much urging from the council who wanted nothing but to rid the village of all remnant of the traitor Orochimaru, in this case, ridding the village of his apprentice and a fellow snake summoner. His guilt lay in his failure as Orochimaru's sensei. If he had done a better job with Orochimaru, or killed his wayward student when he discovered him performing dangerous human experiments on fellow Leaf Shinobis, there was no telling how many lives would have been spared, not to mention how differently Anko would have been perceived by the village. Taking another puff on his pipe, Sarutobi turned his thoughts onto Kyuubi. He would never forget the first time he met her in Naruto's mindscape. Flashback. I wish you have those cool red eyes like Itachi. Then, you can join me and Kyuubi in my mindscape. I believe I have an idea that might work, even without the Sharingan. Sarutobi was not called the god of the Shinobis for nothing. With knowledge of nearly every jutsu in Konoha, his aged hands made the necessary hand seals for a mind invasion jutsu and found himself standing with Naruto in front of the cage that housed the 9 tails. Sarutobi, to what do I owe this displeasure? Kyuubi growled from within her cage, her gargantuan eyes glaring down at him. Hello, Kyuubi. It's Kyuubi no Kitsune, to you, you old prune. And if it wasn't for you correcting some of your mistakes recently, I would have crushed you with my paws by now. A look of concern and confusion appeared on Naruto's face as he glanced back and forth between Sarutobi and Kyuubi. Finally he had enough of Kyuubi yelling at his grandfather and broke silence. Don't yell at Gigi anymore, he pleaded. What mistakes are you talking about? Kyuubi softened her tone slightly in response to Naruto's bidding and replied, those mistakes are about you, you ingrate. Despite her facade, Sarutobi could clearly see Kyuubi's concern for Naruto. Looks like Naruto was correct about her. Thank you for watching over Naruto until I was able to rectify certain inadequacies. However, today, I'm here too. I know why you are here, interrupted the 9-tailed fox. Transforming into her elegant human form, clothed in a white gown with red swirling patterns, she held in her hands those 2 manuscripts and continued, you want to find out what's in these manuscripts and why Madara wants them so much, correct? Stunned by her beauty, Sarutobi could only nod dumbly. He tried not to ogle at her humanoid form, but failed miserably. Naruto's description doesn't do her beauty justice. Gigi, why are you looking at my sensei that way? Kyuubi smirked, satisfied that she still had such an effect on men, but her mind soon registered that the old pervert was undressing her with his eyes, and her righteous fury became evident in her voice. Naruto, reach in here and hand these over to that old fart and tell him to stop eye stripping me. Gigi, what is eye stripping? Is that a special dojutsu? Asked the curious blonde when he handed the manuscripts to his grandfather. Replied Sarutobi nervously, you'll understand when you're older. What Sarutobi read in those 2 manuscripts was nothing short of amazing. Even if Naruto could only do half of what they claimed those trained in them could do, he could easily end up among the top 20 shinobis in the world. It was too incredible since there had never been any ninja techniques capable of a tenth of what was described in each of these 2 manuscripts, and Sarutobi, nicknamed the Professor, would be a good judge of that. The only way to confirm what these techniques could do was to see them both in action, but since Naruto had not mastered the 9 yangs yet, the Professor settled for a sparring match, his monkey-style Yari versus Naruto's 9 stances sword. Naruto, let's spar, show me the power of the 9 stances. He had wanted badly to see the 9 stances in its mastery in action, having had doubts about whether or not his grandson was actually able to defeat Itachi. Even harder to believe was that he had Itachi so outclassed in Kenjutsu that their weapons did not even clash. Alright, Gigi, but don't cry to dad when you had your hini handed to you by your grandson. The first match with Sarutobi was the most challenging match Naruto had ever had in his mindscape. Sarutobi's fluid mastery and his experience put him in a whole different class above Itachi. His choice of a longer weapon also presented a challenge for Naruto, limited Naruto's sword reach. However, in the end, the 9 stances spear-conquering stance overcame Sarutobi's Yari and monkey-style attacks. The second match, however, Naruto elected to match his grandfather's weapon with his own Yari and easily applied the 9 stances to his longer weapon choice. The 9 stances could easily be used with any choice of weapon and still be just as formidable as if they were performed with a sword. The creator of these stances, the Lonesome Hermit, at the acme of his skills, used nothing but tree branches, leaves, grass blades, or rocks to defeat his enemies. The application of the 9 stances could only be limited by the user's degree of mastery and the vividness of his imagination. The second match did not go as well for Naruto. In fact, it came as Naruto's first defeat in his mindscape. Sarutobi had it figured out. The 9 stances technique was a reactionary attack technique, or at least that was as far as Naruto was able to apply it. The more advanced the opponent's attack patterns were, the more advanced the 9 stances became. Sarutobi figured that if he was to limit his monkey style to just the very basics, then the 9 stances would also revert to their basics as well. Using this tactic, Sarutobi was able to catch Naruto off guard by switching between basic and advanced attack forms. Of course, this would never have worked if Sarutobi had not had the time to think of a way to defeat the 9 stances. Also, this would never have worked had Naruto been a student of at least one other sword technique, one not dependent on feeding off the attacks of its opponent. However, since Naruto had only learned how to react to attacks by attacking the weakness in the opponent's offense and had never been taught how to initiate attacks, he was quickly overcome by his grandfather. End flashback. Sarutobi took another puff as he concluded his inner musing on his first visit to Naruto's mindscape. During these past 4 years, Naruto took to his training like a fish took to water. While Sarutobi focused on giving him scrolls detailing chakra and seal theories along with a variety of ninjutsus, Asuma provided him with physical training, such as jogging around Konoha and wearing chakra-enhanced weights. The adopted blonde was no longer the scrawny orange-wearing, loudmouth knucklehead. He had grown to a respectable height for boys his age, no longer wearing orange, and could remain cool and collected under pressure. He only acted like a knucklehead in front of others. Finding a sensei to teach Naruto sword art had been challenging. The foremost quality Sarutobi had looked at when selecting a trainer for his adoptive grandson was whether or not the person could maintain secrets and keep his nose out of where it was not welcomed. A curious trainer would ask too many questions, possible arousing others' suspicion or prompting them to do their own investigation. The Hokage definitely did not want any of Danzu's route to get suspicious of Naruto's training with the 9 tails or to investigate into his true abilities. Next to the importance of the trainer's ability to maintain absolute secrecy was his or her skill level in Kenjutsu and genuine desire to help Naruto get stronger. Ideally, Itachi would be the best candidate, since he was the one best trained in the Uzumaki Kenjutsu, trained by none other than Naruto's own mother. The next ones whom Kushina also had a hand in training were Azuki Yugo and Gekko Hayate, among whom the Sandaime selected Yugo, since she was already sworn in under the Anbu Oath of Secrecy. Yugo proved to be a good choice. Not only were her Kenjutsu skills highly developed, she was also a person who sympathized with the Jinchuriki's childhood and cared for him as a person. With another puff, Sarutobi's thoughts drifted to his son, the council, and the Chunin exam ahead in the horizon. Naruto will become a genin today. With Konoha hosting the Chunin exam in 6 months, Naruto will become a Chunin in no time. Minato, soon, your long-awaited heir will be making his own marks among the shinobi nations. Kami help them. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Yugo was mindlessly making her way to the Anbu headquarters. Her thoughts were on Naruto, the past 4 years of her training him, and his genin exam. In her mind, there was no doubt that Naruto would pass with flying colors. She was deep in thought because Naruto had specifically requested his grandfather to place him and Sasuke together in the same genin team. Sarutobi, Asuma, and Yugo all had asked Naruto why, with Yugo looking for ways to talk Naruto out of electing to be teamed with Danzu's newest protege. Naruto's response was so that he could fulfill his promise to a friend, to watch over the Uchiha survivor. It appeared to Yugo then that Sarutobi seemed aware of the promise Naruto was referring to and reluctantly agreed to his request. It's been a week, and I still can't get Naruto to tell me whom he made the promise to. At first, Yugo was also reluctant to support Naruto's decision, but in the end she was left with no choice. These 4 years with Naruto had taught her that his promises would prove truer than gold. With Naruto, a promise is a promise is a promise. There was no talking him out of it. Such an honorable trait was commendable, though. Asuma did end the discussion with a stern caution against making promises on impulse, without thinking things through. He feared that this noble trait would become his son's Achilles' heel. Yugo's thoughts traveled down the memory lane to 4 years ago when Asuma surprised her with an invitation to family dinner at the Sarutobi compound. She was not sure what to make of his invitation. By then, Kurenai had already informed her that he was one of the perpetrators of the hot spring perversion. If it had not been for Kurenai there to calm down her fury and Anko there to inform her of their budding romance, Yugo would have torn Asuma a new hole. Lucky bastard. Another thought came to her mind at the time. Such an invitation should have been extended to Anko, but if Asuma was going to cheat on her friend, then Yugo would make a big stink about it at the family dinner. However, all of Yugo's suspicions were invalidated. The dinner invitation had been a guise to offer her a personal, secret mission from the Sandaime, one concerning a newly adopted blonde, one Uzumaki Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. That child had been on Yugo's mind since the assumed death of Kushina, the person who taught her the Uzumaki family jutsus. Back when Kushina had offered them to her, she had not understood why anyone would be so willing to teach another person her family jutsus. But, back then, with war and the possibility of more wars looming in the air, she was so eager to get stronger that she accepted Kushina's offer without the mind to ask for the details that would later plague her curiosity for years to come. Sarutobi's words that night brought Yugo her first attainable goal toward fulfillment regarding her sense of loss when it came to Kushina-sensei. I want you to train Naruto and pass on to him his family jutsus like his mother would have liked had she been here to do so herself. Training him in his mother's fighting skills. Words could not describe how happy she was that night when Sarutobi told her that she would be secretly training Naruto in the Uzumaki techniques. Finally those techniques would be passed to their rightful heir. Unfortunately, the offer brought with it another question to plague Yugo, was that the reason that Kushina had trained her in the Uzumaki family jutsus, because she had known all along that something would prevent her from teaching them to her children. One area I want you to focus on is the Uzumaki sword art. For reasons unknown to Yugo, the Uzumaki sword art came easier for Naruto than the other family jutsus. She reasoned that perhaps it was because of the type of training he had with Anko. That was not to say that Naruto had a hard time learning the rest of the family jutsus. Surprisingly, Yugo found that the boy was a good student material, as long as she showed him how to do it, instead of trying to explain it to him. In addition to being an exceptional learner, there were times that Yugo suspected that there was more to the blonde Jinchuriki than what met the eyes. It did not happen often, and when it did, there was always enough circumstantial evidence to argue that it was a coincidence or a beginner's luck rather than Naruto having slipped his mask and fed into her suspicion that the blonde was hiding the true depth of his abilities. A good example of this happened while she was teaching him the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. While technically not an Uzumaki family jutsu, it was a favorite technique of Kushina's. It was while she was explaining the hand seals needed to perform the jutsu and its many applications that she saw it, the spark of understanding, in Naruto's eyes. But then it was gone just as quickly as it was detected, and Naruto reverted back to his show-it-to-me first way of learning jutsus. Furthermore, when her not yet a genin blonde student practiced the jutsu, he made 3 perfect Junin-level Kage Bunshins on his first try, all without breaking a sweat. Yugo was convinced that that was not just because he was Kushina's son. Maybe it was because the 9 tails sealed in him, but still, he was not overpumping the jutsu with chakra. In fact, on that very first try when he created those 3 Kage Bunshins, he apportioned his chakra with the precision control of a medic nin. Not a gram of chakra, not even a single milligram, was wasted. Could it be the genes, or are you hiding something, Naruto? She began to believe that what she saw was not a fluke but rather a rare occasion that Naruto had let slip a hint of his true abilities. After all, how dumb could the boy be if he kept getting new jutsu scrolls from the Hokage every few weeks? Of them, she figured, even if he was only able to master half, he would already have a repertoire of techniques that would make most shunins jealous. Then again, she could very well be underestimating his ability to learn by merely reading from the scrolls. Though she had no way to assess Naruto's true strength, she was even more clueless when it came to Sasuke, which was what got her worried. Finally, she arrived at her destination. As it had been her custom upon entering the Anbu complex, she headed to the lounge, hoping to find the person she was looking for, and she did. Anko, the skimpily dressed interrogator, saw Yugo eyeing her as she walked in. A smirk appeared on her face. Like what you see. Sorry, Anko-chan, I don't swing that way, replied Yugo, a little embarrassed by the implication of that remark. Besides, aren't you already taken? True, but it doesn't feel that way this week, said the new arrival with a sigh. Her playful smirk turned into a dejected frown. Yugo asked, trouble in paradise? I wish. At least there's the makeup sex to go along, said Anko, making obvious the reason of her frustration. He's been really busy training Naruto the past week. Saying something about needing to take things more seriously. He's been obsessing about training Sun since he returned from his mission to a civilian village near the water country. Oh, remarked Yugo. Normally she or Kurenai would be quick to tease Anko about her relationship with Asuma, especially having an opportunity as good as this landing before her. However, at the moment, her mind was still thinking about Naruto's promise to watch over Sasuke. Since Naruto's unusual request last week, Yugo had narrowed down the possible candidates that Naruto could have made the promise to, namely, Kakashi, Itachi, and Danzo. Kakashi, because his feelings of indebtedness for his deceased teammate Uchiha Obito might be transferred to the sole Uchiha survivor. Itachi, because he did not kill his brother during the massacre and could have wanted someone to watch over Sasuke. Danzo, because he had invested 4 years of training on his Sharingan protege. Of them, Itachi remained prime suspect number 1. After finding the right question to ask so she could verify her conjecture, she directed it at Anko. Do you think it's possible for someone as highly targeted as Itachi to enter and leave Konoha without being detected? I suppose. Why? What's on your mind? Asked Anko. She knew that there was something wrong with her friend when the anticipated opportunistic insults about her personal life never came. Nothing. I have couple of things I'm trying to piece together. That's all, said Yugo. She wanted to run something by Anko, but she had yet to gather enough facts to support her idea, much less even to present it. After all, her theory about there being more to Itachi than merely a traitor was purely based on assumptions. If she was to present it to anyone, she would want to be able to support it with more than mere assumptions. By the way, heard anything about Itachi? Have they ever sent any hunter nins after him? No, replied Anko. Of course, Anko as an interrogation specialist knew that Yugo was keeping something big from her. Her loyalty to Konoha demanded that she ask the one question she hoped that her friends would always answer no to. You're not thinking about betraying Konoha, are you? What? Exclaimed Yugo in disbelief. She realized that she had to divulge what the situation was, otherwise, Anko might bring her to Ibiki. Oh, you got it all wrong. The reason behind my question actually concerns Naruto. See, Naruto said he wanted to be placed on the same team as Sasuke because of a promise he made with someone. I'm just trying to figure out who what someone was. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to go all patriotic on you. By the way, did you say that the little dweeb requested to be placed on the same team with Sasuke? Did he request that I be his Junin sensei, or was he only focused on that mud boy? He probably forgot, didn't he? By the end of her rant, Anko was self-perpetuating her own anger and became too angry at Naruto to wait for Yugo to respond. She stood up abruptly and continued to mumble as she took her leave to find Naruto. Yugo could still hear the words, "I'll strip him naked and hang him upside down in the girl's bathroom," ringing in her ears after Anko had been long gone. She wanted to go after her and tell her that Naruto did ask, but she was afraid that a calmed-down Anko might ask her more questions she was not yet ready to answer. Besides, Naruto the prankmaster getting humiliated in front of his peers might make him think twice about pulling another prank again. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. In an undisclosed area, the man with a single eye-hole orange mask sat alone in a cave, pondered over his plans with his group of missing nins, especially on a certain traitor who left the organization 4 years ago, Orochimaru. Flashback. Kabuto, I have a new mission for you, said Madara. His tone hinted him nursing a wounded pride. Pain had initially opposed having Orochimaru added to the roster, citing Orochimaru's traitorous ways, but Madara pressed onward with adding him. Now, Pain took every opportunity to remind him that he alone bore this responsibility of his betrayal. His wounded pride easily turned into a need to exact revenge. I'm at your service, Madara-sama. It involves the Akatsuki traitor, Orochimaru. He recently left the organization to pursue his own plans. In addition to your continued services spying in Konoha, I want you to spy on Orochimaru as well. First, become his subordinate, and then gain his trust. Wouldn't it be easier to kill him? Isn't that the punishment for betraying you? Asked Kabuto, who was all too eager to repay his master. He will pay for the inconvenience and the loss of time that he caused me in the recruitment of another member. He knows too much about our organization and our plans. His betrayal will be dealt with, but, no, not yet. He'll still serve my purpose. You want him to attack Konoha? Yes, looks like I've raised you well, replied Madara with a hearty laugh. I want you to hide your true abilities and present yourself as someone he's looking for, a capable medic nin. As you wish, master. By the way, don't overdo it when you're sowing into him the idea of attacking Konoha. If anything, that snake hates to be manipulated, so you must do so while letting him believe that it was his idea all along. Take your time. However, I expect you to have him attack Konoha in exactly 4 years' time. Why 4 years, Madara-sama? Asked Kabuto as he shifted his specs higher on the bridge of his nose. Does it have anything to do with your plans for Sasuke-kun? Well, you turned out to be a smart one, didn't you? Said Madara while thinking, maybe a little too smart for your own good. Pausing, through the lone eye-hole of his orange mask, he pierced sternly at the young man that came under his care as a 5-year-old child. He continued, make sure that you are smart enough to remain loyal to me. I would hate to have to destroy a sculpture that I've been carving for 10 years. Yes, master, I could never forget the kindness you've shown in raising me. Good. Dismissed. End flashback. Konoha, the tides have turned against you. Wong of the monastery, my time has come. Just you wait. Chapter 8. Chi Training 101 Naruto vs. Kyuubi. In the monastery of ancient manuscripts, the 3 junior abbots each gathered their own 5 apprentices, as they had been accustomed to doing for the past 4 years. Junior Abbot Feng gathered his students in the center courtyard, seated in lotus position. First apprentice, have your fellow apprentice brothers mastered the lessons of Chi as learned through the flight of an eagle? The tallest of the 5 bowed and replied, Yes, Abbot Feng. They have recently mastered them, and we are now working on incorporating those lessons into their Zodiac Kung Fu. The Zodiac Kung Fu was the most comprehensive hand-to-hand combat technique to ever grace the mortal realm. It consisted of stances patterned after the movements of the 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac, including the movements of the mythical dragon. To be able to amplify one's strength with the flow of qi while executing the zodiac was no small feat. A few words of commendation were in order. Excellent. Since you've learned how to channel qi properly, you've probably noticed how your kung fu skills have suddenly progressed in leaps and bounds. However, you still need many more years of meditation and practice before you achieve a complete oneness of your kung fu with the flow of qi. But don't worry, that will come in time. Meanwhile, I want you to continue practicing against each other, perfecting your zodiac kung fu. Remember the Grand Master Abbot's warning from 4 years ago: we could be under attack from the masked shadow and his cohorts at any time. His 5 apprentices replied in unison, "Yes, Abbot Feng." "Good," said Feng as a proud smile accentuated his kind and serene face. Then he blinked his eyes, and his smile softened slightly while he channeled a warm but powerful qi that encased their gathering. His qi permeated into his apprentices and stirred the qi that was innate in them. The 5 teenagers immediately felt the effects of their teacher's qi infusion technique. Closing their own eyes, they quickly assembled into sitting lotus and shifted their inner energies to absorb Feng's gift to them. Once they were done, they opened their eyes and performed a Buddhist ceremonial obeisance to thank their teacher. Feng sagely raised his right hand to acknowledge their bow and said, "No need. Now, I need you to pay attention to what I am teaching you next. This could save your life one day." Immediately, he had every apprentice's attention. "Have you noticed how the birds remain aware of their surroundings in their sleep?" The first apprentice replied, "Birds keep a third of their brain awake in their sleep to monitor their surroundings through their visual and audio sensory." "Good," commended Feng with a small nod. His shaved bald head momentarily reflected sun glare onto the eyes of the 5 sitting before him. "Though you can't make a human brain do the same, you can channel qi to your eyes and ears before you sleep, and it will monitor your surroundings and alert you to action when necessary." The 4th apprentice frowned as he asked, "That sounds great, but how do we continue to channel qi when we're asleep?" "By using a technique that Master Wu of Mt. Wudang left as a parting gift 4 years ago before our Honorable Grand Master Abbot sent him off to search for the prophesied guardian of the 2 nines. "Excuse me, Abbot Feng," interrupted the youngest apprentice. "I was not aware that Master Wu had been here, much less that he had left for his search. All this time I thought he was too high-nosed to accept the Grand Master Abbot's invitation to our monastery. Actually, he came as quickly as he could after receiving our message. His art of levitation was quite advanced and made the long trip in 2 days, covering a distance that regular martial artists would need 2 weeks to do. I don't think the Grand Master Abbot himself could have covered that distance any faster." Master Wu left the very next day after he had finished discussing the prophecy with the Grand Master Abbot, replied Feng. With a sigh of relief, the boy continued, "Does that mean we don't have to worry about pranks?" Feng was puzzled at the oddity of the lack of pranks, then he remembered what happened. "Now that you've mentioned pranks, I do seem to recall hearing him mutter something about some dumb apprentice stepped into a trap he had intended for Master Wang." While everyone was guessing what that prank might have been and who the dumb apprentice was, the youngest apprentice volunteered with embarrassment, just realized that the accident he had experienced 4 years ago was actually Master Wu's prank. I think I might have accidentally stepped into the trap intended for our Grand Master Abbot. I bet it had something to do with food," suggested the boy seated closest to Feng, taking a small shot at the 5th apprentice's ferocious appetite. Some light, slightly muffled snickers could be heard. "Well, 5th apprentice brother, would you tell us what happened already?" urged the 2 older boys seated on both sides of him. "Wait, I know," said the eager boy seated behind the 5th apprentice. "Were you the one that fell into the pit while trying to get the red bean buns sacrificed to Buddha? And didn't the accident set off a domino fall of the Buddha statues?" asked another boy. "I was trying to get the buns for the Grand Master Abbot," defended the 5th apprentice. "They're his favorite." "Sure you were," came the unison cries from his apprentice brothers as they snickered at his misfortune. "Abbot Feng, can we please continue with our lesson?" pleaded the desperate boy, as the humiliating prank played over and over in his mind. Feng smiled kindly at him and gave a small nod as he called his apprentices back to the subject at hand. He enjoyed jokes and teasing as much as anyone, though his students rarely saw it, but there were far more important matters for them to discuss than one poor boy's voracious appetite and propensity for making a fool of himself. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Yumino Iruka was not happy at the moment. He had been staring at the student profiles for quite a long time. It was now way past midnight, and yet he was still having a difficult time deciding what to do about this graduating class. Ever since the Sandaime reformed the academy 4 years ago after the defect of Uchiha Itachi, Iruka's job had been a living hell at the end of every school year. No longer was he able to simply graduate the students based on their exam scores and pass them off to be tested for teamwork by their Junin senseis. After the loss of a whole platoon of elite ninjas to the Uchiha massacre, the academy adopted the enhanced and more rigorous curriculum designed to quickly replenish Konoha of capable ninjas. Added to the mix, there had been a steady increase in the need for more security, especially when the Hokage kept hinting a possible attack from an unknown enemy, someone known by the name of Masked Shadow. Gone were the days of Junin senseis handholding the genin grads on how to work together as a team. Their time was more valuable spent elsewhere. Fittingly, the Reformation called for the academy teachers, instead of the Junin senseis, to determine who were cut out to be ninjas. It was a logical way to conclude the year. Determining whom to promote to genin was not what made Iruka's job difficult this year. His frustration lay in the process of team selection. He started by grouping together the obvious choices. Ino Cho Shika was easy for him to bundle together as a team. Naruto and Sasuke, the co-rookies of the year, would have to be grouped together, per the Hokage's directive. However, what to do with the remaining 4 genin grads, Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, and Haruno Sakura, was what kept Iruka late at the academy. Logic told Iruka to form a tracker team with Kiba, Shino, and Hinata, but Kiba's mom had made a personal request of him to keep Kiba and Sasuke together, if at all possible. It would have been so much easier if I can separate the 2 rookies of the year, and make it a Kiba-Sasuke Sakura team, Iruka sighed. As it is now, I can't put Kiba and Sasuke together, along with Naruto. It would leave the leftover team too unbalanced to survive their first real mission. On his desk, he fished out 2 sheets of proposals from the randomly scattered leaflets on his desk. With a sweep of a hand, he dumped the rest his scribbles into the wastebasket and plopped his head onto the desk while thinking to himself, I'll present these 2 options to Hokage-sama in the morning. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Naruto woke up to the melody of birds chirping outside his window. Today would be the day he found out who his third teammate would be. As excited as he should be for such news, it was not why he was so eager to get out of bed this morning. For the past 4 years, he had been working off and on with his adoptive father on the kung fu learnt from the guardian monks. Surprisingly, Asuma turned out to be quite knowledgeable in hand-to-hand combat and had learned enough from the monks during his 2-year training mission to satiate the boy's ferocious appetite for anything kung fu. However, one thing that continued to frustrate Naruto these past 4 years was how Asuma kept delaying teaching him how to channel chi. Today would be different. Asuma had lost a bet to Naruto and was now honor-bound to teach him. This time there would be no wiggling out of it, no last-minute missions that seemed to mysteriously crop up whenever Naruto's arguments for why he should learn it were particularly sound, and no important dates with Anko that had to be kept. Naruto rubbed his eyes to rid them of their sleep residue and made a shadow clone. He quickly dispatched it to the academy while his original self got dressed and went to look for his adopted father on their private training ground. Asuma could be found leaning against a tree, smoking his usual minty cigarette. He too sent a clone to the academy. While most Junin senseis sparred with their students to gauge their skills, he had always taken it easy on the first day, focusing on getting to know the students' personalities in lieu of seeing what jutsus they could perform. A clone could easily fulfill such a light duty, and when it dissipated, its knowledge would return to the original. His inner musing was soon interrupted by the sound of a metallic projectile cutting through air as his left hand caught a kunai aimed at his right shoulders. Just when he was going to chide his protege about how foolish it was to announce his location with a flying kunai, he felt another, Naruto, landed a straight open palm thrust on his sternum. As Naruto witnessed his adoptive father doubling over from the hit, he felt a piece of sharp, cold steel pressed against his throat. "Hey, I'm not done yet, Dad," he said before he dissipated along with the Asuma clone that he hit, leaving the kunai holding Asuma by himself, on alert, looking left and right. Naruto took to Cage Bunshin like fish to water. After Yugo taught it to him, he had used it at every opportunity until it became second nature. He had been pretty good at it even before all of the practice, having always been inclined towards ninjutsu abilities and usually very quick to figure them out. Of course, having an abundant amount of chakra so as not to feel the drain of the jutsu did not hurt either. Due to Naruto using it so much during their sparring matches, Asuma got quite proficient with Cage Bunshin as well. Before Naruto started using it, he rarely incorporated that jutsu into his combat repertoire, but now it was practically an old habit. After what seemed like a long time of nothingness, Asuma saw a boy's shadow emerge from the woods located to his far left, blocking him from the blindingly bright morning sun. The boy walked slowly towards him. In his right hand was his sword, unsheathed, and in his left, its sheath. "Naruto, do you want to learn how to channel chi, or not?" Asuma shouted across the field. His eyes never left the approaching shadow. "You know how long it usually takes us to finish." Before he voiced the rest of his complaint, he ducked a sword swing and drew forth his knuckle knives charged with his wind chakra to swing behind him, where he perceived a Naruto clone had attacked from. In a distance, the shadow boy looked on with amusement on his face as his clone sparred with Asuma, only for his smile to turn into a frown. Naruto spun to his left, swinging his sheath with his spun, aiming it for the eyes of his mentor, whose real self was standing behind him. Asuma brought his left hand in attempt to block Naruto's swing, but the anticipated swing never came. He turned his head to stare inquisitively at Naruto and saw him sheathing his sword. Just when he was about to ask his adopted son why, he felt it too and spoke up. "You know it's not nice to spy on fellow Leaf Nins. Plus, what business do you have on our private training ground?" Asuma's emphasis on the word private carried a warning tone to the one spying on them. Out came a girl wearing a Chinese-style pink vest. Her brunette hair was rolled into two hair buns, one on each side of her head. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spy on you." Naruto's clone, who had been keeping an eye on her while she watched the sparring match, walked up behind her and interrupted her attempt to explain herself. "Actually, you did," said his clone before dispersing itself. The brunette turned around to the source of that voice, but only found a smoky remnant typical of a dispelled clone. She was completely shocked that someone a year younger had been able to sneak up on her from behind. Even more impressive was the fact that he'd done it with a shadow clone. To have such mastery over a Junin-level technique at his age was incredible. He's good, in fact, too good to be fresh out of the academy. While young Kunoichi was looking for the clone behind her, the real Naruto walked up to her to introduce himself. When she turned back to Asuma and Naruto to get a better look at the boy whose sword art captured her attention a moment ago, she came face to face with the real Naruto. He was actually standing so close to her that their noses were nearly touching. Her brown eyes widened and she rocked back on her heels in surprise, but didn't step away from him despite the invasion of her personal space. In fact, she couldn't step away from him. She was completely mesmerized by his cerulean blue eyes, his untamable spiky blonde hair, and his ferial birthmark whiskers. Naruto was unsure of what to make of the intruder. She was the first girl he met that looked and carried herself like a kunoichi, at least from what his clone had observed when it discovered her spying. Though he knew that Hinata took her training seriously, his blue-haired classmate lacked the assertiveness of the brunette before him. Asuma raised his eyebrows, amused at the scene before him, and noted how his clueless adopted son was embarrassing the girl. He then saw the blush on the girl's cheeks deepened as she stumbled to formulate words to explain why she was there in the first place. Well, her mind drew a blank. Those two words were actually the closest she was coming to an intelligent response to Naruto's accusation. He just kept staring at her with those eyes, and the longer it went on, the more difficult it seemed for her to form any coherent thoughts. Tenten was not the fangirl type and was by far one of the most promising kunoichis to come out of the academy since Anko and Yugo. However, She could not help but behave this way at the moment because this was the first time she had been this close to a boy. Her being a budding 13-year-old with raging hormones did not help the matter either. Asuma decided to spare the poor girl from further embarrassment for the moment and asked, "Does that scroll in your pouch have anything to do with why you're here?" She let out the breath she'd been holding and said, "Oh yeah." Though she was breathing once more and had regained some control over her brain, she remained mesmerized by the boy's eyes. Somehow she managed to say, "The Hokage gave my team a D-rank mission to locate you, Yugo, and Anko. I thought you would be at the academy or spending time with your genin team, but the Hokage told me to come here instead." "Me?" asked a puzzled Naruto, pointing his finger to himself. The brunette-haired girl, who had been unaware that she was still staring into the eyes of the blonde in front of her while answering Asuma's question, covered her mouth and shook her head. She was beyond feeling embarrassed at the moment, so much so that she lost all confidence in what to say or do. Never before had she acted so unprofessionally, falling so short of her own standard of what a kunoichi should be, while she was on duty. Learning that the girl was not a threat or a spy from Danzo cast her in a favored light with the blonde. Now he looked at her again, this time appreciating her plain, but attractive attire, her keen, trained, but gentle brown eyes, and her tiny, adorable pink lips. There was one thing that puzzled Naruto, though. Why is her face red like Hinata's? No, Asuma came to her rescue again. "I think it's me that the Hokage wants. By the way, Naruto, this girl is Tenten. She is Maeda Guy's student and graduated from the academy last year." "Tenten, this is Naruto, my adopted son." Tenten, knowing Guy, he probably had his students split up to see who can find us three first. "If we hurry, we may beat your teammates, though with one of them a Hyuga, I doubt you'll claim first." "But Dad, we're supposed to." Naruto left that sentence unfinished. He knew better than to give away more information about himself to a stranger than he already had. He filed away the information about Tenten's Hyuga teammate for later. Not missing a beat, Asuma quickly added, "I know, I'll leave a clone with you. But I want the real you." Naruto began to whine. "Stop whining. You sound like Konohamaru when you do that. You're a genin of Konoha now, and, in the eyes of many, an adult. When your team or mine receives missions that take us outside of the village, we'll be seeing each other even less." "I know that, Dad," said the slightly downhearted blonde. "That's what makes our time together now much more precious." "Yes, Naruto, these moments are indeed getting more and more precious." Asuma reflected on how fast the Chunin exam was approaching. If Naruto became a Chunin, and there was little reason to believe that he would not, he would be told about his real parents, and all the cards would be on the table. "Will you still treasure our time together once you learn of your true heritage?" "All right, Naruto, my clone will go with Tenten. But before they leave, you should tell her what you think of her." Tenten, who had been listening attentively to their interchange and observing the deep fondness between the boy and his adoptive father, was caught off guard by Asuma's last remark. "What do you mean what he thinks of me?" asked Tenten with an even more crimson blush, trying to hide both her nervousness and excitement to hear Naruto's answer. She was more than intrigued by the boy in front of her. Before meeting him in person, she had already heard more than she cared to from the girls in the village about this young, good-looking blonde who graduated the top of his class. Rumors from most shinobi adults and girls around her age were quite favorable, but the ones from some of the civilian populace were, to put it mildly, quite derogatory in nature, calling him names such as demon bastard and Yondaime killer. Asuma's comment was not innocent in nature. He intentionally wanted to further Tenten's embarrassment. It served her right for spying on them. However, he knew that his naive son would wrongly assume that he was being asked, "Do you think trust her? If so, tell her it's okay to join our training sometime." "Ha, that'll teach you," thought Asuma to himself while he said to Naruto, "Well, son, what are you, shy? Tell her what you think of her." Naruto, unsure of what just happened during the little exchange between Asuma and Tenten, tilted his head and gave them a slightly puzzled look. After a moment, he gave a small shrug and said, "Oh, I think you're okay, Tenten. Come train with us anytime. But don't sneak in next time. We don't take kindly to unannounced visitors." Now Tenten was even more flabbergasted. She was expecting, She looks like a serious kunoichi to me, or, if he was somewhat bold, I like her cute hairstyle. She certainly was not expecting Naruto to outright ask her out on what could be considered a date. She looked at the boy and found no pretense on his face, then looked at Asuma, trying to decipher his facial expression. Hee, don't worry, Tenten, Asuma said with the best straight face he could muster. My clone will explain on the way. After Tenten left with his clone, Asuma said, I didn't think it's possible that a person's face can turn so red. Yeah, about that, do you know why girls do that? Asked Naruto. 3 girls in my class do that all the time. Hinata Haim sometimes looks like a tomato in a blue wig. I've even seen a couple of girls in the village get that way when I try to talk to them. It's weird. Asuma did his best not to smile too smugly. It would not do to spoil the fun just yet. Well, since it's about girls, I think you should get an answer from one, he suggested as innocently as he could muster. You mean, like Anko? Asked Naruto, horrified at the thought of asking her. He had never considered her the type he would go to for advice on relationships. No, I meant your other female sensei, Yugo, replied Asuma. Inwardly he mused to himself, Naruto and Yugo would make a good couple, if only they're closer together in age. Nevertheless, Naruto needs someone older to guide him through his emotions and give him advice about girls. It's just unfortunate that Anko, whom Naruto relates well to, is not the type for this sort of thing. Maybe later, but let's get to Archie training. You'll teach me this time, right, Dad? Of course, I lost our bet, didn't I? As Asuma said that, he motioned Naruto to follow him. They leapt out of the Sarutobi compound to a secluded forest nearby. One thing about Konoha was that there was always a forest nearby. The one that they went to had a lake and a waterfall. I think you've let me win on that one, Naruto deduced out loud. I mean, it was my first time playing poker, so how could I possibly have beaten you? You probably just wanted to teach me chi as much as I want to learn it by then. Or you were tired of hearing me asking for it every single day. Asuma had been avoiding this particular subject not because he lacked the desire to teach Naruto or felt that it was too difficult for the boy to learn, but rather, it was because he himself was never able to channel chi. He had only learned the theory of how it worked, but knowing how to do it was quite different than being able to do it. Well, that was true to some extent, but trust me when I say that you won that hand of poker all on your own. Some people just have all the luck. Just like your mother. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Part of what made Konoha the most powerful of the hidden villages was her near impenetrable defense. The first layer, and the one that most intruders neglected to look for, was an invisible, spectral spherical barrier protecting the hidden village from invasion of all sides, including from above. Any intruders would be immediately detected. The few who were able to go through the barrier undetected had to have been very good or very familiar with the barrier. Kabuto, whom Orochimaru had taught how to do so, fell into the latter category. Madara the Masked Shadow, who had been with Konoha since her founding, was with the former category. The stranger standing on top of the Hokage monument, namely on top of the Shadaime's head, also belonged to the former. Looking below from where he stood, he saw a bustling village, one with the latest of conveniences, fashion and things that money could purchase. He felt a little out of place. The scene before him was definitely different than the modest Taoist temples or Buddhist monasteries that he was used to seeing. With his right hand, he held his trusty sword up to shield part of the sun as he looked into the sky. It's almost noon, he concluded. Taking a deep whiff of the appetizing aroma coming from the restaurants below hustling to prepare for the lunch hour rush, he decided on visiting the small ramen bar to start. All that traveling, and a few days of living in the wilderness since he left the last village he stopped at, the swordsman had worked up quite a healthy appetite for civilized food. There seems to be a good place to listen into the town happenings, he said to himself as he pointed his sword towards the nearby lantern with the Ichiraku kanji. After this, I'll visit Old Man Flying Monkey. He had always found it amusing to translate the Japanese names into his own language. With a single leap off the Shadaime's head, he launched into sky, his legs moving as if they were treading in air, and landed in front of his destination. Even though his aerial display was slightly ostentatious, he remained careful not to be detected. He was not a master of stealth for nothing. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Iruka arrived late to class and was greeted by a rowdier than usual crowd. He did not blame the students, though. After all, they had been waiting an hour for him to arrive with their grades and team assignments. The slightly out-of-breath Chunin came as soon as he was done meeting with the Hokage. In addition to discussing his proposed team assignments for the Sandame's approval, he was also learning about the betrayal of his company instructor, Mizuki, who got caught trying to steal the scroll of forbidden techniques the previous night. Refocusing his mind to the tasks at hand, Iruka hushed the restless 12-year-olds and prepared himself to address them one last time as their academy instructor. Please be seated. First, I must congratulate you for your earnest efforts throughout your years in Ninja Academy. You all should be proud of your achievements, regardless of whether you've made Genin today. I know I am of you. He took in a deep solemn breath, like he had often done when delivering the next part, and said, as you already know, finishing the school curriculum does not guarantee you a Genin placement. Genin, like all shinobi ranks, is earned and only granted to those who are qualified for it. Unfortunately, not everyone is. Iruka paused and noticed that his students were hanging on his every word, eagerly longing for each syllable that was uttered from his mouth, with the exceptions of the emotionless Aburame and the sleepy Nara. He sighed, if only I could get them to pay attention like this during my history lectures. Some of the girls shot what they hoped was not their last look at Sasuke and Naruto, in this case, his clone, and wondered if they would continue with their ninja career and hopefully be placed in one of their teams. Among those girls were Sakura and Ino, who had been daydreaming about doing their victory dance when they were placed on either Sasuke or Naruto's team. This year only 9 of you have met those qualifications. The ones that I called are to remain in class and wait for their Junin senseis. Those whose names I did not call, please be dismissed. You may go to the admissions office if you wish to get another chance by enrolling to repeat your final year. The class reacted to his announcement with a few frantic look-arounds and light whispers. The children echoed the phrase, only 9, with shock. Iruka continued, Team 10 consists of Nara Shikamaru, Yamaka Ino, and Akamichi Choji. Your Junin sensei is Sarutobi Asuma. No, shouted Ino, interrupting Iruka's announcement. She promptly stood and pointed her finger at the boy whose spiky ponytail gave his hair a distinct pineapple shape to it, though it was hard to tell with his head still slumped on his desk, and a spiky-haired brunette who just finished his 10th bag of potato chips. Why do I get stuck with both a lazy bum and an eating machine on my team? I should be on either Naruto or Sasuke's team. Sasuke gave Ino, who was standing next to him, a deadly cold stare. She felt his eyes on her, turned to look at him, and instantly fell silent. It was the first time she almost wished she had not beaten Sakura to take the seat next to Sasuke. The raven-haired boy then kept his stare on the platinum blonde until she sat back down. Once she did, Sasuke resumed patting Chame and turned his head towards the front, waiting for his own team to be announced. The Naruto clone, who had turned its head toward Ino's cry, witnessed the disturbing scene and mentally filed it away to discuss with his adoptive grandfather later. Team 8 consists of Aburame Shino. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Chi is like a river that flows freely into the sea that is never full. To the place from which chi comes, to there and from there, it, like the river, returns again. Asuma's words echoed in Naruto's mind. In his boxers he sat on a rock underneath a small waterfall. The waters hammered the 12-year-old's head and cascaded over his body as he continued his meditation. To learn chi, you must clear your mind of all things. All that defines you, your existence, must be deadened. Your everything, your laughter, your sorrow, your happiness, your sadness, your triumph, your failure, your love, your hatred, your peace, your anger, your thoughts, must become nothing. Only then can you feel and harness chi, or the natural energy that has always been around you, inside you, constantly going in and out of you. While Naruto trained under the waterfall, Asuma stood on the shore, looking on and remembering how difficult it was for him when he tried it with the guardian monks. They had told him that it would have been easier if he had started younger. He certainly hoped so, for Naruto's sake. The last thing Asuma had told his adopted son before he went under the waterfall was for him to imagine the water washing everything off of him. Once Naruto could no longer feel the cold pounding water or hear the thunderous splashes, he would have completed this first part of the chi training. It took Naruto a long time to transcend his mind over being under the heavy pounding, hearing the roaring waterfall, and feeling the freezing coldness. Once he entered into the meditative state, he systematically sorted through his emotions and memories and temporarily removed everything that defined his existence from his consciousness. The firsts of the emotions that went were the pain and suffering he had experienced in his earlier years. He had never wanted to hold on to those memories anyway. Slowly, other emotions and memories washed off of him. Though I'm sure there are things you wish to erase from you forever, once you've stopped this exercise, everything will come into existence again. A couple of hours later, Naruto was successful in emptying everything out of him. Everything that was his to empty, he emptied. Only one thing remained on the blonde's mind, and it was not his to remove, Kyuubi. Naruto now stood in a vast space of emptiness. It was not white or black, it was simply nothingness, void of anything, except the tailed beast sealed inside him. An odd image of his prisoner held inside a gigantic cage in the middle of a vast emptiness appeared before Naruto. This was not the first time Naruto had come to his mindscape on his own accord. He appeared before the transformed humanoid as he had often done since that life-changing night at his first Sarutobi dinner. Kyuubi-sensei. The student sought out the teacher as much as she did him. They often engaged in hours of conversation, discussing the scrolls he had read from the Sarutobi library or the manuscripts on the 9 stances and the 9 yangs. Naruto, I've sensed your arrival. Are you here to bask in my abundant knowledge of the 9 yangs again? Asked the proudest of all tailed beasts. She had transformed into her elegant, beautiful form as a habit since she had often done so to access either of the 2 ancient manuals that were currently in her safekeeping. After 4 years of spending time with his prisoner, Naruto had gotten quite accustomed to Kyuubi's personalities, and at times, found them amusing. Now, however, he knew that the humanoid was delaying for what was to happen next. He replied, since you already know that this training requires me to clear my mind of all things, including you, I'm here to inquire how I can do so. Please tell me what needs to be done. With a deep sigh, Kyuubi said, you're correct, young one, I was delaying this. For you to advance in your training, you must understand the consequences of doing so. Consequences? Asked her vessel with a puzzled face. Yes, consequences, confirmed the humanoid. Once you do this, you cannot turn back. Naruto became slightly nervous and said, but Asuma said that I'll get everything back once I stop my meditation. He did not really want to lose everything that defined him human. You'll indeed get all that you humans value back, your emotions, dreams, and memories, once you've either quit this child's play of an exercise or moved on to the second stage of your training. But what I'm talking about now is more involved than an effortless mind-clearing exercise that you humans do. Effortless, repeated Naruto, incredulous that someone could call something that took him hours to get to where he was at and that his adoptive father was unable to accomplish as effortless. Ignoring Naruto's pointless comments as she had often done in their past encounters, Kyuubi continued explaining from where she had left off. I'm sure that you remembered when that old prune grandfather of yours explained to you the workings of the blasted seals that the damnable Yondaime used to seal me into you. The 12-year-old rolled his eyes in exasperation. Of course I remember, and stopped calling Gigi that. There was no anger or even real irritation in his voice. He had already gotten used to hearing her calling Sarutobi that a while ago. His reactions now were merely out of habit. Kyuubi snickered and continued, now, what would happen if you were to peel that seal off the cage? Nice try, but I'm not going to remove the seal, said Naruto. Don't overthink this, chided Kyuubi. Just answer the question. We don't know for sure, but theoretically your powers would be completely merged into me, and if my mind or body can't withstand the merge, you could take over me completely or I could cease to exist. Good, commended Kyuubi. And what would happen if no one tampers with the seal and you were to die? Then you would die with me. And if I was to be forcefully extracted from you? Gigi doesn't think anyone knows how or has enough chakra to do so, though according to the seal theories I've been studying, it is certainly possible, replied Naruto. If you were extracted from me, then I would die. And if I was still sealed in you, no one tampered with the seal, and I was to die first. Again, no one knows for sure, responded the Jinchuriki, but Gigi thinks I would survive, and the seal would disappear. Well then, said Kyuubi, her patience waning. If you had 1 ounce of intelligence, you should have realized that the only possible way for you to be rid of me is to kill me. Kill you? Asked Naruto while tilting his head, looking puzzled. Why, there must be another way. Perhaps not, replied Kyuubi, sounding unsure herself while remaining ambiguous. But that's the wrong question though. Wrong question, shouted Naruto, his impatience notably heard. This is no time for your jokes or philosophical debates. Why you little brat, she yelled back, I was going to tell you what to do, but I guess we'll just have to do it the hard way. Once the humanoid finished expressing her displeasure, she sent a blast of killer intent towards Naruto. Of all their 12 years of coexistence, this was the first time she deliberately made Naruto feel that he was in danger. So this is what Kyuubi's killer intent feels like, thought Naruto as he struggled to remain standing. He wanted to look down and check his pants, but his neck muscles did not comply. He reasoned that they must still be dry, considering that normal bodily functions did not apply to his form, which was only a figment of his imagination in his mindscape. Ha, Kyuubi mocked, you're forgetting that I can hear your thoughts in here. Don't worry, they're still dry. Are you coming in, or are you giving up? Naruto molded as much of his own chakra as he could muster to counter the 9-tailed fox's killer intent. He had never had the need to access the large reservoir that was his own chakra. Asuma, Yugo, and Anko had all been training him in speed and physical agility and rarely had asked him to mold chakra during training. Even when Naruto was sparring against them, they curbed him from using any of the more destructive and chakra-consuming ninjutsus and limited the sparring to mostly taijutsu and kenjutsu. Thus, Naruto had no clue of what he was capable of doing if he was to go all out with his chakra. Right now, he was pleasantly surprised by the result. He found himself slowly regaining control over his own body. Once he was able to move his neck, he looked over himself and examined the blue haze that engulfed him. Then, he sharply glared at Kyuubi with anger in his eyes. So you want to play rough? Asked Naruto, clearly pissed by his jailer's actions, joking or not. Slowly he walked closer to the cage that held the most powerful of all bijus and passed his small body in between the cage bars. Once he was inside, he sprinted towards his prisoner in attempt to punch her in the face. The humanoid Kyuubi decided to humor Naruto. She let him try his attacks first and waited until the very last millisecond before she dodged each one of them, frustrating Naruto to no end. Hold still, shouted her exasperated jailer. Though Naruto had been speeding up his attacks, he had not been able to land a single one on the humanoid. A part of him worried that if he was to let up on his attacks, Kyuubi would have the opening to transform back to her 9-story self and easily devour him. Of course, Kyuubi had already picked up on the reason behind her charge's anxiety and mused to herself, so the plan is working. Suddenly she stopped dodging and with one arm, she grabbed Naruto by the throat and lifted him off his feet. She shouted into his face, "You imbecile, haven't I taught you anything? Instead of remaining calm to calculate your moves, you barged in here without a plan of attack. What did you hope to accomplish other than getting yourself killed? Is this how you want to die?" Naruto could feel his life force slowly being choked out of him. He did the only thing he knew to do, though he had no hopes of succeeding. He molded even more chakra, giving it his all. Unlike the previous time when he molded chakra outside the cage, Naruto found himself enclosed in a purple-hued chakra. An unfathomable amount of power surged through his body. And unlike before, part of this power felt unnatural and foreign. With eyes widened at the possible implications of his actions, he struggled even harder under Kyuubi's choking grip and managed to whimper, "What have I done? 0.0, 0.0, oh." When Tenten arrived at the Hokage Tower with the Asuma clone, they found Anko and Yugo already there waiting for them. "Suma-chan, what took so long?" asked Anko in between chews as she finished the last of her dango. "Yeah, Asuma, what gives?" asked an equally annoyed Yugo, who was the first to arrive and had been waiting an hour for this meeting to start. Well, Asuma was interrupted by his father's raised hand. He heard his father dismissing his escort. "That'll be all, Tenten." Once she left, a stranger holding an ancient-looking sword entered from a side door. Since he had been told their names, He greeted them while trying to contain his own laughter. "Hello, Moonflower, Red Bean Paste, and Young Flying Monkey." The three Junins turned towards the stranger. Though Anko and Yugo were both fuming at the stranger for poking fun at their names, they held themselves back so as not to breach any peace agreements Konoha made with the nation of this foreign dignitary or to damage the possibility of one in the process of being negotiated. They turned their attention back to the Hokage for his explanation while Asuma remained staring at the new arrival, trying to remember where he had met this man before and how this stranger had used a nickname he received while he was with the guardian monks. Once it hit him, the cigarette he had in his mouth fell to the ground. "Master Wu?" asked Asuma. Chapter 9. Wu to the rescue. Sasuke was more than pissed. Never had he felt as unfairly treated as he did now, not once in his 12 years alive. Even when he was younger, when his parents were still alive, when his big brother was still his hero and their father's favorite son, and when the whole clan praised Itachi as their pride and joy, everything short of erecting a statue in his likeness, all of which gone after that fateful night. Never in his revenge-driven life had he felt so angry. Never mind that he had just lost his dog companion Shame a moment ago during a team orientation exercise, in which the dog had growled at an unknown target in the woods and uncharacteristically ran after it alone. The team attempted to search for him, but to no avail. In the end, Sasuke grew more frustrated at each passing minute of their failure and angrily dismissed everyone so he could brood alone. Shame had been his security blanket since he lost his family to his brother 4 years ago. In terms of his mental health, introducing Shame so early during his mourning had been a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because it helped him cope with the tragedy easier while learning how to make and be a friend. It was a curse because he had become dependent on Shame that his pain was never completely healed. In time like this, where he had been separated from his dog for a duration of time, he became anxious, insecure, and irritable. "How dare them!" he muttered with spite while delivering a punch to a nearly decimated training post. His anger rose even higher when he recalled Danzu's words from a week ago. "Sasuke, you are the sole heir of the mighty Uchiha clan. You alone are the only true possessor of the elite and incomparable Sharingan. You are destined for greatness. It is in your blood. People of Konoha will worship the ground you walk on." "How?" "By assigning me to a genin team," he growled as he continued venting his frustration in Training Ground 7 after his Junin sensei and teammates had left him. Earlier that week, Danzo told him that the Hokage had agreed to assign him to Anbu, which was a goal and an achievement mark, indicating that he was closing in on the gap between him and his brother. Danzo assured him if he made Anbu now and was given a chance to show the Hokage his true power, he would be promoted to captain within a year's time, which means that he would beat the Itachi's record for the youngest to make Anbu captain by a few months. And now, the reality that was today proved different than the vision that was yesterday. His hopes shattered, his excitement disappointed, his frustration and discontent with Konoha grew. Did Danzo lie to me? Sasuke wondered aloud. No, that's not possible. After all, Danzo wants to get more of his men into Anbu, and what could be more valuable to him than having the Anbu captain on his side as well? He has no motive to lie. Sasuke was still enamored with his own abilities, his confidence in his skills never wavered. This much he had learned from Danzu's unofficial route training. His arrogance grew even more since he activated his Sharingan 2 weeks ago. In his mind, getting enrolled in Anbu was a mere formality to make his training and skill level officially recognized. To him, he had already met the requirement for the ranking. The Sandaime, however, would have plenty of motives, he continued his reasoning. His abuse on the training post never ceased. Yesterday, while walking down the street after spending the day adjusting to having his Sharingan activated continuously, he passed a deep-in-thought female Anbu with a sword strapped on her back. During their brief encounter, he saw her lips moving in silence. Since his Sharingan was already on, he inadvertently read her lips in passing. Naruto requested to be assigned to Sasuke's team so he could watch over him. Why would he want to do that? His voice came out more as a frustrated shout than a reflection of his curiosity. The training post finally gave way to the beatings. He clutched his teeth and vehemently uttered the only conclusion plausible to the limited information he was given. So, the Sandaime wants to use his grandson to spy on me, making sure that I'm not like my brother. Who does he think I am that I would follow his footsteps? While Sasuke continued venting his anger, a silver-haired ninja hidden in the shadows among the nearby tree branches watched in silence. A devious smirk appeared on his face as he pushed his spectacles up the bridge of his nose with his right index finger. Heh, without that annoying dog in the way, things are developing just the way he wants them to. 0.0. 0.0. Oh, Master Wu, asked Asuma. The man called Master Wu appeared to be in his 40s and stood about the same height as Asuma. His attire, bluish-gray long robe with a yin and yang circle on its back, resembled that of a Taoist priest from a distant land that the two kunoichis present had only heard rumors about. He carried a regal-looking sword in his left hand. "Ha, little monkey, you remember me," exclaimed Wu. "How could I forget?" replied Asuma. His face cringed as he recalled the day he woke up with a clean-shaven face. To this day, when he looked back to that prank, he still shuddered at how Wu had given him his shave with his long sword, executing a move he had just invented. Of the 2 years Asuma was with the guardian monks, Wu had happened to chance there once. Even though this chance encounter lasted only a week, he had learned more from Wu during that week than all those 2 years with the monks combined. Anko placed one hand on Asuma's shoulder and asked, "You know this clown?" Her previous proprieties towards the foreign dignitary expired along with her short fuse. She looked up and down the stranger with her critical eyes, unsure why an ordinary-looking man would be given the reverence of the title, Master. Master Wu may not look like much, Asuma informed her and everyone else listening in, but he is the headmaster of Wudang School of Martial Arts, which in another part of the world, is recognized for producing some of the best kung fu fighters around. He could easily kill the 3 of us Junins before my dad had a chance to get out of his chair to stop him. To Yugo, the female Anbu among them, Sarutobi, the god of the shinobi, and one who had mastered all jutsus in Konoha, was arguably the strongest and the most powerful ninja alive. For Asuma to use his father as a measuring stick for this person's skills. Could this stranger be that powerful? I wonder what he had taught Asuma and who will win if the Sandaime had to fight him. The Wudang headmaster shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly, not really caring how his skills were measured by his junior. In his peripheral vision he noticed how the talking pair interacted and concluded that there was something going on between the two. Does the young monkey still remember the things I've taught him, or has he forgotten them since he's been dipping his tail in red bean paste? He asked, smirking at his pun and the quick glance that passed between the two. Yugo let out an uneasy laughter, one that could have easily been a guffaw if she had not heard Asuma's claim of this comedian wannabe's skills. Though it was not a hearty laughter, it was her first laugh in some time. Ever since she had learned about Naruto's promise to some unknown person, whom she hoped was not Itachi, that he would watch over Sasuke, she had been too worried about her student to do something as relaxing as laughing at a joke. Yugo gave Wu a second look. Being someone who favored swords herself, she found the stranger's ancient-looking sword mesmerizing. In fact, she felt that the weapon was too ornate to be taken seriously. However, she knew better than to judge a sword by its sheath. Anko, on the other hand, did not find Wu's remark funny. It was not because she took offense to Wu's pun, but it was because his comment hit a subject that had been sore with her lately, namely, she was not getting any from Asuma. Granted, talking with Yugo about it yesterday had let off some of her steam, but she still had plenty of that to blow. She smirked as a plan formulated in her mind. "Suma-kun, you're about to learn the consequences of ignoring my needs." While her bow stuttered to articulate a response to Wu's blunt remark, she replied for him, "Well, you don't have to worry about it too much. Whatever the little monkey has forgotten, he's been recalling them in abundance the past week. And if his tail doesn't find its way back to red bean paste soon, he will be spending the rest of his life recalling your teaching sans tale." This time Sarutobi joined in laughter. His had been a long day, taxing on his mind and emotions, especially after just been briefed by Wu regarding the Guardian of Two Nines prophecy. He could always count on Anko and Asuma to provide him the much-needed comedy relief. While he recalled his meeting with Wu, he wondered, why does everything have to be so complicated when it comes to Naruto? "The reason I called you 3 to this meeting," Sarutobi prefaced, addressing the 3-leaf Junins before him, "is because of Master Wu. Apparently he has business with someone you 3 have in common." Naruto! Exclaimed the said blonde's three senseis simultaneously. Of course, having been the receiving end of Naruto's pranks many times over, they were not surprised that he got in trouble again. What surprised them was that their charge in common had the time, the opportunity, or even the motive to pull a prank on a stranger, a foreign dignitary no less. Asuma looked at Wu and bowed. Master Wu, I'm deeply sorry on his behalf. I'm his father by adoption. For the trouble he caused you, you're welcome to administer whatever punishment you feel just, and I'll add on to it once you're done. I will also make sure that he compensates you for the damages to your valuables from his allowance. The bearded Junin had long stopped bailing Naruto out of trouble that he had gotten himself in. Since he had started to let his adopted son bear up the consequences of his actions, Asuma found Naruto's pranks tamer and less frequent. Well, that's good to know, stated Wu, but he hasn't done anything to warrant punishment, at least, none that I'm aware of. Apparently, he gets in trouble a lot. If they had been listening to him carefully, they would have detected a glee in his voice as he asked that question. Looks like the 9 Stances manuscript has selected another prankster like me. Asuma rolled his eyes and shook his head in despair while sighing, you have no idea what I go through. A faint smile appeared on Wu's face as he recalled what havoc he had caused his parents when he was Naruto's age. Steering the conversation back to the subject at hand, the voice behind the Hokage desk announced, Master Wu wants to take Naruto with him. No, Yugo shouted before her two friends had a chance to respond. She had no doubt that the lovebirds echoed her sentiments. Asuma started to say, but changed his words to reflect the formalities of a ninja to his cage. I mean Hokage-sama, do you really think this is necessary? Don't you think he's already progressing very nicely under S3's tutelage? Besides he has other unconventional training methods, too. Sarutobi understood his son was referring to what they had kept secret from everyone, namely, Naruto's mindscape training with Kyuubi. Before you three draw your own conclusions, listen to what Master Wu has to say, said Sarutobi, his eyes glancing at the three, pausing briefly on theirs to let them know that this was an order. Hi. The 3 Junins relented and bowed their heads in submission. When they raised their heads, their eyes were on the Taoist swordsman. Master Wu, prompted Sarutobi, please explain to them why you've made such a request. Wu began his narrative. 4 years ago, 2 important manuscripts were stolen from the Monastery of Ancient Manuscripts, the 9 Yangs of Qi and the 9 Lonesome Sword Stances. Alone, each contains the most powerful martial art known to man, one in the branch of sword art and the other in the branch of Qi cultivation. Qi? Yugo inquired. Simply put, replied Sarutobi, it's the energy within all things found in nature. As I was saying, Wu continued, slightly annoyed that he was interrupted. In his part of the world, he was one of the few given the highest reverence. Few had the galls to be rude to him, and even fewer were spared to live and tell about it. Mastering only one of them would put you in a class where few are able to hold their own against you. If you master them together, however, no one would be your match. Should you then be chosen by the manuscripts as their guardian, becoming the guardian of the 2 Nines, you would be given the power to destine the world's fate for the next 200 years. Sensing that Wu had come to a pausing point in his explanation, Anko asked, Guardian of the 2 Nines. What does this have to do with Naruto? Currently there are separate guardians for each manuscript, explained Wu. I'm the guardian for the 9 Stances, and Master Wang, the Grand Master Abbot of the Monastery of Ancient Manuscripts, is the guardian for the other. It is a rare occurrence to have one become the guardian for both manuscripts. The prophecy states, every 10,000 moons rises one guardian over 2 Nines. Behind him bowed 9 Qis and 9 swords. Before him bowed fate and destiny. Master Wang and I believe that Naruto has been chosen to be the prophesied guardian. Seeing the puzzled faces on Anko and Yugo, Sarutobi interjected, though the boy is unaware of the significance behind it all, he has in possession the 2 manuscripts. Anko looked at Asuma beside her and noticed a lack of expression on his face. She concluded in silence, he knew already. Who were the ones that stole the manuscripts and how did Naruto end up with them? Yugo asked the Sandame, her suspicion radar going haywire. 4 years ago, her gut told her that this was connected to the Itachi and the massacre somehow. The timeline is just too conveniently close together. Sarutobi with all his years as the Hokage heard the wheels cranking in Yugo's head and steered the conversation away from the forbidden path. That's immaterial now. The point now is that Naruto has the highly coveted manuscripts and he'll be targeted by extremely powerful enemies. One's even more powerful than the village can handle. Dad, exclaimed Asuma, shocked at what his father seemed to be suggesting. You're not saying that we banish Naruto because his presence here will endanger the village, are you? No, not banishment, stated the Sandaime adamantly. With a sigh he said, look, I know you all will miss him, and so will I, but frankly I think he is at a plateau and has grown as much as he could under us while in the security of this village. He'll need time for practice and for his body to mature. But what he needs most of all is field experience. Considering the difficult path in front of him, he'll need all the help he can get, especially one of Master Wu's caliber. Wu made some uneasy gestures to express his awkwardness at being praised. He stated, haha, I'm sure you all have been doing a great job with him, but if it is his destiny to be the guardian of the two nines, he'll need the training that only the current guardians can offer. He paused for them to absorb his compliments and offered them their consolation. It is my understanding that he is expected to return for the Chunin exam, which is only 6 months away. Master Wang and I won't be able to get him near a fraction of the proficiency of where a guardian needs to be by then, but it will be enough time to teach what he needs to do to reach his own potential himself. Just when Wu was about to outline to them the things he planned to teach Naruto, the Asuma clone disappeared, leaving behind a cloud of smoke. What was that? Asked Wu with a worried face. My guardian sense tells me something big is happening with Naruto. I'm sure Master Wang's much more acute radar is going berserk. Asuma was simply using a Kage Bushin, Sarutobi explained. The real Asuma is doing chi training with Naruto. Huh, whispered Yugo and Anko as they shared a puzzled look, feeling they had been kept in the dark about their shared student. They looked at their village leader, then Wu, for explanation and saw Wu's already sober face darkened. What? Exclaimed the swordsman while looking at the spot where the previous clone occupied in disgust. Naruto's a Jinchuriki, and Asuma is training him how to channel chi. Wu frowned for a second, and then his eyes widened. Kuzo. He probably told him to empty his head. By now, Wu was pacing back and forth in the Hokage office, trying to think of a solution to the possible mess Asuma and Naruto might have created. He told me that was what needed to be done, replied Sarutobi carefully as he too pondered the possible implications, quite worried that some harm would befall Naruto. You monkey brain, shouted Wu at the absent Asuma, too preoccupied to hear the Sandaime's words. At that point he did not care that his comment could have been misconstrued as an insult directed at the Hokage. Doesn't he know that it's impossible for a Jinchuriki to truly empty his mind while his Biju remains sealed in him? The only way for him to complete the training Asuma prescribed is to rid the Biju from his mindscape by either killing it or merging with it. Before Wu could continue expressing his displeasure or explain what he meant, a blast of the malicious chakra that had not been felt in the elemental nations for 12 years washed over them. Whispered curses echoed in the room. Wasting no time for explanations, Sarutobi leapt out of the balcony and took off on the rooftops. The rest followed his lead towards the direction of the Sarutobi compound. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. Naruto could feel his life force slowly being choked out of him. He did the only thing he knew to do, though he had no hopes of succeeding. He molded even more chakra, giving it his all. Unlike the previous time when he molded chakra outside the cage, Naruto found himself enclosed in a purple-hued chakra. An unfathomable amount of power surged through his body. And unlike before, part of this power felt unnatural and foreign. With eyes widened at the possible implications of his actions, he struggled even harder under Kyuubi's choking grip and managed to whimper, "What have I done?" He stared at Kyuubi with disbelief, his eyes filled with tears of sadness and regret. He could not fathom why the woman before him would do such a thing. This mutinous action of his prisoner was the last thing Naruto had expected. The demon, whom he addressed as Sensei, knew him intimately since he was a newborn, introduced him to Kung Fu, healed his wounds, and provided him companionship at times when he was alone, was in many ways a mother to him, and one with whom he had the strongest emotional bond amongst the females in his life. Has she been lying to me from the beginning? He felt betrayed and began to doubt everything good he used to believe about the demon fox, including her claim to innocence and her being tricked by someone who should have been dead. After all, she's a Biju, the mythological bloodlust force of nature. All she wanted from the start was to gain my trust so she could take over my body and finish her rampage against Konoha. Of course, Kyuubi was aware of her charge's thoughts. Her smirk never left her face as she reflected how successfully she was executing her plans. If he was going to die, he was going to go down fighting, consequences be damned. Kyuubi must not escape, even if it meant sacrificing himself. The 12-year-old, already mature beyond his years, knew what he must do next. Fond memories flooded his mind as he made firm his resolve. Naruto, come back here with my pipe. No way, Gigi, not until you've agreed to let me legally change my name to Sarutobi. I've told you that it will be easier this way for you to reclaim your heritage when you've become a Chunin. Yo Gaki, do you think your dad likes me? Enko-sensei, don't you mean, why hasn't he proposed yet? Dad, why do you find Enko-sensei attractive? You'll understand when you get older. If you like her so much, why haven't you proposed yet? Soon, son, soon. Naruto, is there something you're not telling me? What do you mean Yugo-sensei? Like, how are you able to master Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and the sword art I've shown you so quickly? I guess you're a better sensei than you thought. Konohamaru, I'm taking the Genin exam today. If I pass, I'll become a Genin. Wow, Ni-san, does that mean you'll be getting all those cool missions? Yep, Ni-san, do your best. A teardrop rolled down his face. Though the whole realism in his mindscape stemmed from the unreality of his imagination, the sadness in his heart was unmistakable. Closing his eyes, he stopped struggling against Kyuubi's choking grip and resigned to his fate as a Jinchuriki, the tragedy of human sacrifice. A satisfying grin graced his face. He felt serene, carefree, and unburdened. His death would ensure the death of the Nine Tails and the safety of everyone precious to him. I will protect everyone. Everything went blank. 0.0. Outside in the real world, watching Naruto sit unmoving under the small waterfall was about as exciting as watching grass grow. Leaning against a tree on a small cliff a decent distance from Naruto, Asuma watched over his adopted son. He had wisely chosen to keep his distance during this stage of chi training. If he got any closer than where he ended up at, there was a possibility that Naruto could sense his presence and chakra signature, thus become distracted and break his mental concentration. Asuma remembered all too well his own inability, frustration, and embarrassment to get in touch with his own chi and the natural energy surrounding him. Asuma, having been preoccupied by thoughts of Naruto and startled by the sudden interruption, the bearded Junin was about to spin around with a kick aimed at what should be the intruder's left temple when he calmed down after his mind focused on his surroundings again. 4 years of watching over his shoulders, guarding Naruto from Danzu's spies, kept Asuma on edge. Easy, it's me, said a same familiar voice. Kakashi, asked Asuma once he got a look at the new arrival. What are you doing here? Why, I can't check on my own student, asked Kakashi with a shrug. Besides, when I noticed that both of you at the academy were clones, I had to find out what was going on. I guess as his Junin sensei, you have a right to know. Asuma turned his eyes back towards Naruto and fell silent for a moment as he tried to come up with a good summary of everything Naruto knew, or at least everything the boy had allowed him to know about. Well, Kakashi urged his hesitant friend, smiling beneath his mask. Go on, brag to me about this boy of yours. Asuma sighed and shook his head. Honestly, I don't really know the full extent of his true abilities. With me, Enko, and Dad, Naruto normally doesn't put up any pretense to mask who he is and what his true skills are, but we've never really pushed him to go all out either. Kakashi could sense that Asuma was being intentionally vague. All I got from that dialogue was that you don't really know how skilled he truly is. Why don't you just tell me what you're allowed to divulge so I'll at least have something to go by? Didn't you get a good assessment of him when you sparred with your team a while ago? Kakashi shook his head. He could tell that his friend was stalling. Please, Asuma. After letting out a heavy sigh, Asuma disclosed, ever since he was adopted as a Sarutobi 4 years ago, he's been pushing himself to the limit every single day. His training was divided into 4 sections. I was given the physical conditioning and taijutsu. Enko took agility and reflexes. Yugo taught him the Uzumaki clan techniques. At that, Kakashi's lone visible eyebrow raised, and Dad taught him seals and chakra theories. "Oh, is that all?" asked the silver-haired ninja. "Aren't you forgetting summoning, elemental manipulation, and genjutsu?" Asuma let out an uneasy chuckle as he rubbed the back of his head with his right hand. "Actually, this wasn't our idea at all. It was Naruto's. He had his reasons." Kakashi gave Asuma one of those looks that prompted Asuma to continue. Asuma sighed and said, "My dad told him that he would learn the identity of his biological parents once he made Chunin." That answer only spawned more questions for Kakashi to ask, but his inquisition was interrupted by the energy spike coming from Naruto's direction. After about 2 hours' time, Asuma finally detected a spike of energy coming from his adopted son. Could this be it? Finally, a breakthrough. "No, something is not right here." "What's happening, Asuma?" asked Kakashi. "I'm not sure," replied his friend. "Let me find out. I hope it's Naruto's chi." He was not sure of what Naruto's chi would feel like, especially since his adopted son was a special case, one with a biju sealed within. Closing his own eyes, he sent out a chakra pulse towards that energy, in hopes that it would respond much like how he remembered chi responded when he was with the guardian monks. Instead of feeling a slow and steady pull on his chakra, he felt a violent, sinister wave of energy slamming against his chakra field. Quickly he opened his eyes, trying to register what had just happened, while failing miserably to shake off the feeling of doom forming in the depth of his being. He looked towards Kakashi, searching his lone visible eye, looking for anything to draw solace on. Within seconds, the same camaraderie that he felt with Kakashi when they had teamed up in missions past came back as strong as it was 6 years ago since their last mission together. And, like acting a role out of their mission's playbook, they nodded at each other and leapt towards the origination of the malicious energy. As they got closer to Naruto, the image of a cloak of red chakra bubbling forth from the drenched boy slowly came to view. Their skins too gradually felt the corrosive effect of the sinister energy. The burning in their lungs intensified with each breath and every advancement. They landed as close to the waterfall as safety permitted. An expression of indescribable agony appeared on Asuma's face as the obvious conclusion dawned on him. Kakashi watched the agony spread across the face of the only true friend he had had since the loss of Obito and the disappearance of Rin, and there was nothing he could do to help. "What have I done?" Asuma managed to whisper, his thoughts slowly sorting through the turmoil in his heart as memories flooded his mind. "Naruto, let's take the day off today." "But why, Dad? Do you have a mission later or something?" "No, son. Let's go get you some new cloth. You're outgrowing the ones you have already." A smile appeared on his face. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and said, "Heh, sorry Dad, the way I'm growing you'll be broke in no time." Asuma reached out to ruffle the hair of his adopted son and pulled him closer. "Not to worry, your dad knows the Hokage personally." "Hey Naruto, what did you do with my cigarettes?" "I thought you told me you're going to quit," rebutted Naruto with an air of self-righteousness. "And I did, but I still need to keep my appearance. I put them in my mouth, but I don't smoke them. They're more like a charm and a prop now. Hurry, hand them over before I head out to my mission." "Naruto, today is your genin exam, which I'm sure you'll pass with flying colors," said Asuma as he inspected the boy's attire and weapon pouch. "I certainly hope so. I'll do my best, Dad, I won't let you down." "You'll be there for the graduation, won't you?" "Of course, wouldn't miss it for the world." Asuma's momentary loss of concentration caused his clone in the Hokage office to disperse. Just when he was about to create another clone and disperse it so that the clone that was sent with Tenten to the Hokage towers would receive the information on the latest development with Naruto, his mind spaced out for a second and his eyes flashed with a light of new understanding as his mind caught up to the effect of the memory transfer from the dispersed clone. "Thank Kami, help is coming," sighed Asuma in relief, confident that they should arrive shortly. "And Master Wu is here. What does he want?" "Well, apparently I'm here to save your son's hide," answered a voice from behind. Wu had snuck up to Asuma and Kakashi undetected. "Who is this Master Wu?" mused Kakashi. "Hey!" shouted a startled Junin who was still midair from the freight. His knuckle knives were positioned on his hands for battle. I warned you about this when we first met. Don't ever sneak up on a shinobi. I could have killed you if I were not expecting your arrival. I doubt that, my friend. I don't think even with us working together are we a match against him, thought Kakashi, continuing his observations in silence. Wrong, monkey brain, retorted Wu with a smirk. Don't bother thinking up a comeback. If my memory serves me, you weren't good at them. Asuma ignored Wu's insults and asked, where are the others? The Taoist headmaster went ahead of Sarutobi once he got close enough to sense the malicious chakra emitting from this direction. For 4 years he searched 4 corners for the prophesied guardian of the 2 nines. He was so used to travel on his own and in a much faster pace than he was going that his impatience got the better of him. Oh, worrying about your red bean paste, huh? Mocked Wu. It seems like she's been neglected lately. Better take care of it soon, or she'll make good on her threat on your manhood. Even though this was a serious situation, Wu resorted to his comedian ways. Like the shinobis in this part of the world, the pugilists of his released their tension through their diversions, which differed from one individual to another. Besides, there was nothing Wu could do to help Naruto until Sarutobi arrived. While he himself could probably suppress the volatile chakra himself, he had no knowledge of seals and needed help examining and possibly repairing Naruto's seal. Yeah, you better listen to him, came the approaching voice of one sexually frustrated female. Asuma gulped. Last time when Anko had to be satisfied after this long of a dry spell, he had ended up bedbound for days. On the side, Wu asked Kakashi, you must be the copy nin, Sharingan wielder Kakashi. Your fame precedes you. And you are? Asked the copy nin, wondering if you are related in any way to an Uchiha. If you are. Wu left his sentence unspoken, but his right hand readying itself on the hilt of his sword gave away his intent. During his 4-year journey searching for the prophesied guardian, he had learned that the ones responsible for the stolen manuscripts, the ones with red spinning wheel eyes, were Uchihas. Since then, he had developed a distrust against them. Though Kakashi was irate that his own question was ignored, he could not let that Uchiha comment slide. It always irked him when people disgraced Obito's memory by assuming that he got his Sharingan because he was part Uchiha. No, I am not. Kakashi wanted to say more, but Wu had his attention turned back to the arriving party. Who the hell does he think he is? Mused Kakashi, quite annoyed at being ignored. Is this how Guy felt all those times I ignored him? Hey, Yugo, copycats here too, shouted Anko with her head halfway turned towards the back once she had a chance to catch a breath from her overexertion, never taking her eyes off the manifestation of the chakra waves that flapped about as they emanated from the boy soaked under the waterfall. Anko, you don't have to shout. I'm right next to you, replied the Anbu sword user. Her eyes too were fixed on Naruto. Both had taken soldier pills and sped past their commander-in-chief once Wu flew past them. They had wanted to test their speed against his, only to be embarrassed by how outclassed they were. Once Sarutobi got there, Wu made eye contact with him and asked, do you know anything about Naruto's seal and how to repair it? Of course, I'm the sensei of the person who taught the Yondaime, the creator of said seal, replied Sarutobi with pride. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the seal. I think whatever fixing we need to do so in his mindscape. I can get in, but not while Kyuubi's chakra rages wildly. Alright, then, let's hurry, said Wu. I can suppress Kyuubi's chakra for a few minutes while you get in and do what you need to do, but remember 5 minutes tops. Sarutobi gave the Wusha master a confirmatory nod. Wu continued, while I take care of this waterfall, please issue whatever orders necessary to ensure the safety of your village. Also please instruct at least one person how to wake you from Naruto's mindscape, just in case. Once he finished his words, he unsheathed his sword, employed the art of levitation, and airwalked above the body of water that separated the shore from the waterfall. When he reached Naruto, he channeled chi into his sword, and before returning it back into its sheath, he stabbed it into a wall behind the waterfall at a spot directly above Naruto. Meanwhile Sarutobi had just finished showing the Sharingan-activated Kakashi the hand seals to break the mind-walking technique and giving orders to Yugo and Anko, telling them to make preparations against a possible Kyuubi attack. Then, he told Asuma to secure the area so there would be any intruders or Danzo spies during this time. Finally, he turned his head towards the waterfall and saw a sight he had never imagined possible. The spot where Wu's sword had stabbed crumbled under the exertion of chi. What began as a hairline of a fracture in the rocks beneath the waterfall quickly expanded into a canyon that ran as far back into the land behind the falls as the eye could see. The waterfall was no more as its water was diverted into the changed topography. That must be the power of Sito, thought Sarutobi, the sword of the guardian of the 9 stances. Actually, what Sarutobi saw was the evident demonstration of the power of chi. No one had yet unlocked the power of Sito, or had the need to. Sito offered no mystical power, unlike other legendary swords, at least none that Wu knew of. However, he did know that it was unparalleled in sharpness and hardness and had never encountered a weapon it could not cut through. The length of its blade extended from the tip of the sword to the butt of the hilt and was made from a special metal especially conductive to chi and chakra. Legend had it that the special metal was formed by the gods in the clouds and then forged into a sword by the demons in the fiery furnace of a volcano. Its sheath was made from jade, which was said to have been carved by the lonesome hermit himself while inventing the 9 stances. According to folklores, jade had the ability to store the essence, chi, chakra signature, and memory, of its owners. As the sheath was passed through successive owners, what started out as a lightly hued green jade deepened its shade. Now the sheath in Wu's hand gave off a navy blue hue, reflecting the beauty of its age and the power of its previous masters. Emitting chi from his every pore to shield himself from the damaging effect of the vile chakra, Wu crossed his legs into a sitting lotus and positioned himself behind Naruto. Then, he held up his index and middle fingers together, channeled chi to them, and in a mere second sealed 20 pressure points on Naruto. On the back of the 12-year-old, 20 tiny energy glows flashed behind the trail of Wu's hand movement. Those pressure points and the sequence in which they were pressed helped to funnel the chi he was about to infuse into the convulsing blonde. Wu's arms and hands gestured several kung fu maneuvers to circulate and amplify chi throughout his body in preparation for an extensive output. Once he was ready, he eased his palms onto Naruto's back and infused chi into him. Chi, the essence of life, the ether of energy, the mother of matter, flowed into Naruto and twirled around his brain, calming the erratic synaptic pulses, his heart, easing the palpitations, his lungs, opening mucus-laden bronchioles, his liver, arresting excessive bile secretion, his kidneys, enhancing toxin removal, and his navel, impeding the escape of the biju sealed within. Once the chakra flare had been suppressed, Sarutobi ran across the pool with Kakashi trailing him to assist breaking the mind walk technique if need be. They leapt onto the rock on which Naruto and Wu were seated. While standing and after confirming the integrity of the seal on his grandson's navel, Sarutobi rapidly formed the required hand seals for the mind walk technique, and then placed his right hand on Naruto's head. 0.0, 0.0, 0. In Naruto's mindscape, Sarutobi's visage appeared standing in a blank space of emptiness that was normally Kyuubi's sewer. He was not one that frequented Naruto's mindscape. This marked only his third. However infrequent his visits were, he had never felt as foreign and as unwanted as he did now. He had hoped for Naruto's presence, definitely expected at least Kyuubi's, but he got nothing. Nothing but vast emptiness. He tried to yell for Naruto, but nothing came out. He tried snapping his fingers, anything to make a sound, and again got nothing. Feeling frustrated and useless, he was just about to terminate the jutsu when he heard voices. Every syllable boomed at him from all directions. Wu's voice said, "Kyuubi, this is as far as you're going to get. Your ambition stops with me." A feminine voice which Sarutobi guessed belonged to Kyuubi said, "Who the hell are you and how come I can hear you in here? Don't tell me you are a chi master." "By all means, no," replied Wu's voice, "but my limited chi cultivation ought to be enough to delay you until the old monkey fixed the seal." "Ha ha ha," sounded a sultry laughter that would put Kurenai's to shame. "The seal does not need fixing. My vessel breached the seal when he entered into my cage on his own accord." Upon hearing his grandson's stupidity, Sarutobi wanted to gasp and curse, and would have, if not for the vacuum state of nothingness that prevented him from so doing. This left Sarutobi to wonder why it was possible for him to hear them and yet unable to see them. He reasoned that they were communicating with their chi, and that perhaps it was too late to save Naruto, if neither his grandson nor Kyuubi were visibly present in the mindscape. No matter, replied Wu's voice. Although the response sounded calm and nonchalant, Sarutobi could tell based on his brief encounter of Wu that he was convincing himself of the only acceptable outcome of this episode. HMPH, you arrogant human, came Kyuubi's voice, you don't even know what is happening, much less how to or if you want to stop it. I've felt your energy, came the reply, and I didn't detect any malicious intent in your actions. What did that old croon give you to smoke in his pipe, huh? Don't you know that I'm the evil incarnate Kyuubi no Kitsune? Of course you are, and you're also emitting this motherly aura all around you. You've tried to camouflage it with your Biju chakra, but you can't disguise your chi. What the hell does that supposed to mean? Thought Sarutobi. Does this mean? His thoughts were interrupted by their dialogue. This time, he noticed that the mood turned much lighter. Well, aren't you a clever bastard? Heh, yeah, that's what my students have said behind my back, especially after I've gotten them good on a prank. So, you're a prankster like Naruto, huh? Sounded the sultry voice. However, Sarutobi noticed the next words were uttered by the Biju's untransformed savage voice. Get out of here. Let me spend my last moments of existence in peace. No, I will not let you merge with Naruto. Sarutobi concluded that either Wu deliberately wanted to make his point or that he was readying himself for something strenuous. Then he heard Kyuubi's voice. Ha, there's nothing you can do about it. This is my choice to make. Merging with him will hinder him from fulfilling his true potential. Kyuubi's angry voice shook Sarutobi's footing and brought him down to his knees. I'm the most powerful Biju that ever came into existence. And since I'm sealed in him, I am his true potential. Wu's voice was still calm. He is the prophesied guardian of 2 nines, the dual guardian of those 2 manuscripts in your possession. However, if you merge yourself with him, he will most likely be rejected by the spirit of their former masters. Ha, the spirit of their former masters, came Kyuubi's response, the guardian of the 2 nines. Ha, those haughty fools of old and their child's play that they called kung fu. How does any of that compare to my awesomeness and the infinity power that is my chakra? Wu's voice came unrestrained, making obvious his displeasure. Enough. You are not to insult the former guardians. I had wanted to make nice, but you spit in my face. No more. I'm going to forcefully end this charade now. Suddenly Sarutobi heard words addressed to him. Get out, now, old monkey. I'm going to suppress her chi. Then, Sarutobi released the mind-walking technique and returned to the real world. There he saw sitting behind Naruto a much older Wu, his once coal dark hair grayed and his 40ish face wrinkled. A pillar of white thick steam ascended from Wu's head. Chapter 10. Naruto's Fate. The malicious chakra wave was felt by all in Konoha. There was no mistaking it. Those who had been alive 12 years ago, and old enough to remember, knew what that chakra was. Just when pandemonium was about to erupt, Anko and Yugo returned to the village in time to carry out Sarutobi's directives, directing several cavalries of Anbu through the village, declaring the Hokage's evocation of the Edict de Senju, an old wartime decree that was used once by the Shadaime to keep everyone indoors, away from harm's way. No one questioned it, almost no one. Danzo was one. He wanted to know what was going on and sent out his ex-route subordinates to circumvent the Anbu cavalries but were unsuccessful as they were heavily guarded by Sarutobi's forces. Another was the double spy of Orochimaru and Madara, whose cover was an inconspicuous medic nin of Konoha, Yakushi Kabuto. Because of the distraction Danzu's ex-route loyalists furnished, the ANBUs were too occupied to notice a certain speck-wearing silver-haired medic nin getting away. 0.0. 3 days later, a bun-haired brunette wearing her usual pink vest outfit made her way out of the Yamanaka flower shop with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. It was crowded, more so than she had ever remembered seeing it to be. As she walked out, she took a glance at the long line of girls waiting. She sighed and whispered to herself, looks like the number of Naruto's fangirls rivals that of Sasuke or Neji. I'm glad that I'd lined up early. As she admired the artistry of arrangement, her thoughts went to the girl behind such skill. Poor Ino, she'd wanted to see Naruto herself, but she got stuck helping out at the shop. Then the brunette noticed that the card in the flowers shaped like a heart. She blushed a little at the implication, but left it alone, and continued to walk toward the hospital. Once she got there, she was told by the receptionist that Naruto still could not have any visitors. She then had to surrender her flowers to the hospital staff and had to watch with disappointment it getting placed in a room full of similar presents wishing for Naruto's speedy recovery. Feeling insignificant and doubtful that hers would ever get noticed, she turned around and was about to leave the hospital when she heard someone called out her name. Tenten. Turning her head toward the voice, she saw a pink-haired girl waving her hands and a blue-haired girl sitting next to her looking downward and pressing her fingers together. She tilted her head slightly, trying to remember where she had seen them before. Sakura and Hinata. 0.0. 0.0. Oh. In Naruto's hospital room, the mood was grim. Silence reigned as other occupants processed their thoughts on their favorite blonde who'd been lying motionless in bed, with the only sign of life being the shallow heaving of his chest. Suma-kun, it's been 3 days since we brought him back, said Anko, expressing the anxiety that had been in everyone's mind. Tell that comedian ex-sensei of yours to get off his ass and do something about this. Go book a room with your monkey, retorted Wu, who was the only one sitting. We'll send someone deaf to get you if there's any development. Oh, bite me. No, that's Suma-kun's job. Wu replied with a satisfying smirk as he watched his former student's face deepen in color. HN, remarked Anko absent-mindedly. She had been going at it with Wu for days now to pass time. It amused her that he could always come up with something new and smart to piss her off and take her mind off the comatose boy for a few minutes. Wu had never left the boy's side since that fateful day at the waterfall. Suppressing Kyuubi had taken a lot out of the Wudang headmaster. He himself had to be carried back by Asuma. Although the past 3 days had allowed him enough time to recover most of his chi, he had yet to return to his full strength. However, his true age was once again camouflaged by the youthful vigor and appearance that his resourceful chi afforded him. Gone were the gray hair and overly wrinkled face. The past few days that Wu had tended to the boy's bedside was spent mostly looking out the window. It was not because he was longing for the modern conveniences that a prosperous village like Konoha could offer in comparison to his outdated and plain Taoist temple. He had spent so much time looking out because it happened to face east, the direction from which he came. It had been 4 long years, and he missed his disciples. There would have been more people waiting by the blonde's bedside had their schedules been as open as his. They had been in every day to check on him though. Every morning, though, like today, they had all gathered for their daily unofficial meeting with the Hokage. Hokage-sama, do you still wish to send Naruto away after he wakes up? Asked Kakashi, trying to breathe some optimism into the room. The implied if, though unsaid, rang loud and clear in everyone's minds. If he wakes up, he'll do so today, Wu muttered to himself from the corner. Kakashi leered at the Taoist priest whose back was turned toward him. When he does, he will, but now I'm not sure if he'll be under positive influence, replied Sarutobi to Kakashi's question, equally annoyed at Wu's blunt statement. Wu pretended to turn a deaf ear. What about my team, then? Inquired Kakashi with his eyes back on his favorite reading material. I'll be 1 man short. That's where Anko comes in, replied Sarutobi without paying attention to the reactions of Kakashi and Anko. Kakashi's facial expression was hard to read, with it being hidden behind his mask and his perverse book, but his sole visible eyebrow arched upward. Anko's face was easier to read, and at the time, it was one of confusion. Sarutobi was distracted, splitting his attention between worrying about his comatose grandson and filtering Kakashi's questions. After a second, the portion of his attention that had been reserved for all things not Naruto spotted the look on Anko's face. He cringed noticeably. What? Shouted Anko as her eyebrows furrowed, her face showed a mixture of emotions. You are not going to put me in Kakashi's team to babysit Prince Uchiha and his fangirl, are you? Anko, retorted Kakashi, with his eye still glued to the smut. Technically, I'll be the one babysitting them. Though his words sounded nonchalant, the meaning of his tone was clear. Kakashi was unwilling to share the oar on how to steer his team. Anko was just about to give Kakashi a piece of her mind when her thoughts were abruptly jolted by voice from her superior. Enough. The Sandaime now turned his face toward them, making eye contact. Once he had their attention, he turned to Anko first. You've told Naruto that you wanted a genin team yourself should one becomes available, didn't you? Anko could only nod, surprised that the boy had actually done her that favor. Well, with the roster already filled, you won't get your own team this year. But in Naruto's absence, you can still remain a sensei if you become one to his teammate Sakura. But, Hokage-sama, Sarutobi sagely raised his hand to silence her protest while turning his attention to Kakashi. He took a puff before continuing. Kakashi, you will be focusing your attention on Sasuke. At the mentioning of that name, Yugo turned her head toward them, remembering how the tone was similar to Naruto's when he was requesting to be assigned to Team 7. Because of Danzu's influence on the boy, my gut tells me that something big is about to happen, and it will involve him. At this point, Sarutobi gave the ex-Anbu captain a solemn look. Readjust the boy if at all possible, but I trust that you'll do whatever it takes to ensure Konoha's safety. The implied directive rang loud and clear in Kakashi's mind. Even though he felt he'd owed Obito more than anything, his Anbu training made him realize that the greater good of the village came first. 2 resolute hi's were given. Dad, interrupted Asuma, who had left Anko's side when she was called forth and was now sitting next to Naruto. Look. The room focused its attention on the comatose boy whose eyelids were struggling to open. Everyone was holding their breath for Naruto to regain consciousness. All but Wu moved closer to his bedside. Don't get your hopes up yet, said the wuxia realist, who had remained by the windows, unintentionally putting a dampener on everyone's spirits. What comes next will be the boy's toughest fight yet. As if on cue, the boy's head violently turned from side to side, as if he was in the act of shaking off an imaginary grip on his neck. 0.0. 0.0. Oh, Naruto. Since you already know that this training requires me to clear my mind of all things, including you, tell me how to do it. Kyuubi. For you to advance in your training, you must understand the consequences of doing so. Once you do this, you cannot turn back. The only possible way for you to be rid of me is to kill me. Kyuubi sent a blast of killer intent towards Naruto. Of all their 12 years of coexistence, this was the first time she deliberately made Naruto feel that he was in danger. So you want to play rough? Naruto entered the cage and sprinted towards his prisoner in attempt to punch her in the face. You imbecile, haven't I taught you anything? What did you hope to accomplish other than getting yourself killed? Is this how you want to die? Kyuubi grabbed Naruto by the neck. Naruto could feel his life force slowly being choked out of him. He did the only thing he knew to do, though he had no hopes of succeeding. He molded even more chakra, giving it his all. When molding chakra, Naruto found himself enclosed in purple hue and an unfathomable amount of power surged through his body. A part of this power felt unnatural and foreign. With eyes widened at the possible implications of his actions, he struggled even harder under Kyuubi's choking grip and managed to whimper. What have I done? Closing his eyes, he stopped struggling against Kyuubi's choking grip and resigned to his fate as a Jinchuriki, the tragedy of human sacrifice. A satisfying grin graced his face. He felt serene, carefree, and unburdened. His death would ensure the death of the 9 tails and the safety of everyone precious to him. I will protect everyone, screamed the hospitalized boy as he sat himself erect with eyes wide open and sweat beads forming on his forehead, rolling down the sides of his face. He looked around and blinked his eyes several times. Slowly the imagery before his eyes cleared as they readjusted themselves to sight. He called out the names of his loved ones as their faces became distinguishable to him. Dad, Gigi, Anko-sensei, Yugo-sensei, Kakashi-sensei. He paused, trying to think if he knew who the strange swordsman standing next to the window was. Not trusting himself, he pointed there and asked Asuma, Dad, there's a strange-looking person standing there, right? Yeah, son, reassured Asuma while letting out a soft chuckle, relieved that Naruto was himself. How do you feel? Weak, replied the 12-year-old whose stomach just rumbled its own response, hee, and hungry. Oh, I'll go get you some ramen, volunteered Anko, her foot already out the door. Although she was glad that the Gaki had made it, she was never good at these happy feel-good I'm so glad you're alive scenes. Thanks, Anko-sensei, he called out, but she had already left. Naruto, said Sarutobi, Tell us what you remember. Naruto wanted to, but silently nodded his head toward the stranger, his body language asking if he could speak freely. Sarutobi nodded and said, not to worry. He knows everything and was a big help. I'll explain later. Just tell us what you remember. Naruto scratched his head and twisted his lips briefly as if he was trying to wring the answer out of them. Well, I remembered the water washing over me and then I entered my mindscape and had my chat with Kyuubi. He went on to relate the scene his mind repeated countless times before he woke up. So, what happened to me anyway? I probably overdid it and fainted, right? It was a bad dream, right? Asked a worried Naruto as he puzzled over his condition and everyone's facial expressions as what he'd said was being digested. Why do I feel so weak anyway? Probably because you can't draw on Kyuubi's chakra or her healing property. Hearing his adoptive grandfather's solemn words and grave facial expression confirmed the worst of Naruto's fears. He clutched his fists in a handful of bed sheet, trying to focus inward and access his tenant. Once he entered his mindscape, he found the cage of Kyuubi where it always was, at the epicenter of the walls of Labyrinth. Except, unlike his previous visits, the seal engravings on the walls were not pulsing with Kyuubi's vibrant chakra. Another very significant difference was that now the gargantuan cage was completely covered by a giant taijutsu symbol of yin and yang draping over it. Naruto was about to call out to his tenant, but his mind got pulled back into reality by Sarutobi's voice echoing down his ear canal. You can do that later, Naruto. Right now I need your mind back on what we have to tell you. Shaking his head to rid the mind-numbing effect of exiting his mindscape, the 12-year-old was about to protest and plead for a few more minutes of quietness when his eyes caught movement from the strange swordsman, whose taijutsu symbol on the back of his cloak now became visible. His eyes then widened in shock as his mind registered how that symbol was exactly the same one he saw draping over Kyuubi's cage. You, pointing his finger at Wu, Naruto shouted in the loudest voice his weakened condition allowed him to muster, which only made it come out sounding rasped and coerced. What did you do to my Kyuubi-sensei? Wrong question, Baka, retorted Wu as he moved in closer to let the boy get a better look at him. Not what I did to her, but what she did to herself. Besides, you're not exactly blameless here. What were you doing inside her cage anyway? On the side, Yugo and Kakashi reflected on what Naruto had just said. My Kyuubi-sensei, and it's a she, mouthed Yugo in an undertone. She knew that Naruto had the Biju sealed in him, but she did not know that he was communicating with it, or, now that she knew, her, much less being taught by her or his having such bond with her. Could that explain why sword art comes so easily for him? Kakashi's thoughts were, is this the secret Asuma was talking about, or is there more? Naruto looked away in shame as he reflected on how easily his emotions had gotten the best of him, causing him to make such a grave error. He had known that the Nine Tails was taunting him, but he did not stop himself from taking the bait. His only hope now was that his foolishness had not caused any irreversible damages. So, what now? Asked Naruto after he finally got back the resolve to face the issue again. Wu said in a mocked comforting tone, don't worry, you did protect everyone. That solicited a few chuckles in the room and a blush from Naruto, knowing they were poking fun at his loud declaration of bravado. Sarutobi answered him next, wanting to make sure the boy did not end up being too tough on himself. Your tenant was trying to force a merger, willingly sacrificing her existence and erroneously thinking that it was the best way to help you achieve more power. But I don't want more power, especially not at the cost of her life, interjected Naruto in his defense. He did not want to be associated with those traitors who had left the village whom he had learned about in the history books, namely, Orochimaru, Itachi, and Madara. She didn't finish the process, stated Wu, still looking outside the window. Duh, I may be a kid, but I'm not stupid, retorted Naruto, finally glad that he had somewhat of a retort against Wu's verbiage, albeit a weak one. If she had, I wouldn't be in bed still, feeling weak all over. Wu turned his head toward the whiskered blonde and growled with a comment of his own, if she did, you'd probably be dead by now. Wrong, said Naruto, stretching out the word for emphasis. If she did, I'll be so strong right now that there's no stopping me from ripping you a new one in a spar. For reasons Naruto had yet to understand, this Wu guy was getting under his skin. Oh, I would love to make you wish you hadn't uttered those words, taunted Wu. Interjected Sarutobi while deliberately clearing his throat to get their attention. Naruto, since you can't access Kyuubi's chakra or detect her presence, you are correct that the merging was incomplete. However, Master Wu here was correct. Naruto heard a vindicated HN coming from the direction of the window. If the merge had been successful, you'll be a mini hybrid of Kyuubi without any control of yourself at best or a dead genin at worst. It was very fortunate that Master Wu was with us when we found you. To save your life, he had to take drastic measures to arrest the merge. What drastic measures? Whispered Naruto nervously as he prepared for the worst. Sarutobi looked away and gave a short nod to Wu to cue him on. I had to suppress her chi. Naruto snapped his head toward Wu and shouted, what the hell does that mean? Asuma chastised in his fatherly tone, Naruto. Sorry, Dad, but this guy, acting all cool, just irks me. Said Naruto in his defense. Haha. Wu burst out laughing. Probably because we have so much in common. Why you? Naruto growled as he flipped aside his sheets, ready to attack. In a blink of an eye, Wu had covered the distance between the window and the bed, with his fingers having already sealed off 3 pressure points on Naruto's chest, temporarily immobilizing him. The shinobis in the room were ready to come to Naruto's rescue, but Wu simply held his hand up to call them off. A few in the room had already realized that if this had been a real fight, they would not have stood a chance against him. With his attention still on the boy, Wu stared into the 12-year-old's eyes and said, Listen Gaki, I've had to be away from my disciples for 4 years to search for you. Kyuubi is small fries compared to what's really in store for you. You have within you the ability to change the world, and if I could help it, for the better. Men have killed in the past trying to get their hands on the 2 manuscripts sealed within you. And if I don't get you ready for your enemies soon, you'll become like all others before you who have failed to become the guardian of the 2 nines, a mere asterisk in the pages of history. Guardian of the 2 nines? Asked Naruto, who was still struggling to free himself from Wu's pressure point immobilization technique. What are you talking about? What does this have to do with whatever you've done to Kyuubi-sensei? Wu had only immobilized Naruto's body, but left alone his speech. The prophecy foretold that the next coming of the Guardian of the 2 Nines would fall 4 years ago, around the time when those 2 manuscripts in Kyuubi's possession were stolen from their place of keeping. I believe the thief wanted the Kung Fu manuals so he could be the Guardian of the 2 Nines. And a baka like you, though for reasons I can't comprehend. Naruto growled, evidently had the grace of fate, destined to become the next dual guardian when someone handed those manuscripts to you 4 years ago. I don't want to be a caretaker to some really old manuscripts. Naruto responded furiously. Why you? As Wu said that, he walked away in disgust. He did not want to lose his cool and take out his frustration on a 12-year-old. Sarutobi continued in his place and said, well, you don't have to. If you really don't want to, just give Master Wu the 2 manuscripts, and he'll be on his way. Naruto's facial expression was that of relief, while Wu's was confused as to where the old man was going with this. He was about to ask, but stopped when Sarutobi continued his reasoning. But know that the next guardian isn't scheduled to appear again for a few hundred years. Remember what our friend in common, both knew he was referring to Itachi, had told us about Madara and how he's after these manuscripts too. Naruto had calmed down and could start to see where his Gigi was leading him. All right, he quietly stated, I'll think about it some more. Then his anger returned as he replayed what Wu had told him. Pointing his finger at the swordsman, he shouted, you still haven't told me what you did to my Kyuubi-sensei. Simple, Wu replied unfazed, I put her into a state similar to hibernation. She'll be out of commission for 3 years. Unfortunately, that's the longest I'm able to suppress her with chi alone. During this time you must become strong enough to withstand her influences in the future. What? Who asked you to do that? The boy shouted passionately while struggling ever more so against the immobilization. Relax, Naruto. That will wear off soon, reassured Asuma, who had been a recipient to the same technique couple of times during this tenure with the guardian monks. For now, listen to this guy. Master Wu is a very capable teacher. He can teach you many things that we couldn't do while in the village. He will help you realize your full potential. What do you mean, Dad, by, while in the village? You're not saying. One look at the faces of Asuma and Gigi told him what he needed to know. That means. Naruto looked away as tears swelled his eyes and asked, how long will I be gone? At this moment, Anko came back with Naruto's favorite ramen orders, in tote were Tenten, Sakura, and Hinata. Anko had already known about it, so she was not surprised at all. The girls on the other hand had looks of disbelief on their faces. 0.0, 0.0, oh, omake. During Wu's 3-day wait for Naruto to wake up from his coma, he'd spent time in Konoha trying to get to know the ninjas better. One incident was particularly noteworthy. The day after rescuing Naruto by the waterfall training area, Wu saw Guy and Hitaki Kakashi by a river washing their signature attires. Kakashi was scrubbing the stains off his mask fabric, working through a month's worth of laundry, apparently down to his last clean mask. Guy too was in a similar situation, down to his last clean spandex. The only remarkable difference was that his stains were more noticeable and, because of their location, had more potential to cause embarrassment. Both were using powder detergent for added scrubbing power. Kakashi was trying his best to keep his cool while his ears were begging to be shielded from Guy's constant ramblings about the power of youth and about how proud he was of his prized protege, Rock Lee. Wu watched their interaction from a distance. At first he found the scene somewhat interesting and amusing, but after a while, he too got tired of Guy's whimsical nonsense. Then he started to feel sorry for Kakashi, who had so much longer to endure, considering there still remained a month's worth of masks to be washed. After all, there's a thin line between insanity and humor. Wu believed Guy crossed that line a day before he was conceived. The Taoist priest figured that the best way to assist Kakashi was to help them get those stains out of their clothing faster. Reaching into his sleeves, he found a vial of the Wudang laundry powder, and with a performance of Tai Chi he managed a small breeze that carried his powder concoction into theirs. On the next round of wash, Kakashi and Guy were pleasantly surprised that their efforts were more rewarding this round than their previous attempts. This led Guy to boast about how brightly his power of youth was burning. The marked improvement made Kakashi realize that relief from Guy's loud ramblings was coming soon. Guy was ecstatic, shouting a variation of his favorite mantra, "The power of youth conquers all." However, soon their happiness and relief turned into grief and anger. Not only did the detergent remove the stains from their signature attires, it also removed some of the coloring, and in Guy's case, due to his overzealous scrubbing, some of the fabric as well. Kakashi's dark gray masks, sporting various hues of pink and purple, now looked more like a scarf. Guy's spandex training suits now sported blotches of yellow and white, along with holes in embarrassing places that would make Anko's fishnet shirt modest in comparison. The copy nin had suspected something was wrong with their detergent when its efficacy had mysteriously increased. Taking a sniff of it, he found its smell slightly different from usual. In fact, it smelled a little like the Taoist priest he'd met at the waterfall yesterday. Forming a few hand seals, he summoned his favorite nin dog to track down Wu. Currently Kakashi, Guy, and Wu were at Training Ground 7. "What is the meaning of this?" asked Kakashi while holding up a piece of evidence, a pink and purple scarf mask. "Yeah," concurred Guy, holding up his own evidence, something that looked like it had been chewed by a dog. He. Wu could not help but crack up when he looked at what happened to their signature attires. His laughter only deepened when he pictured how ridiculous they would look were they to put these on now. Ho, was what his laughter became as he was trying to inhale. Oh, now holding his side, regaining composure, Wu replied, "I was only trying to help." "We're going to teach you a lesson, you funny-looking man," said Guy. This coming from a man wearing green spandex only made Wu start another round of uncontrollable laughter. Guy narrowed his eyes at Wu and said with disdain, "You will feel the power of our youth, right Kakashi?" Kakashi cursed his karma and knew that if Guy was going to fight Wu, he couldn't back away, or he would never hear the end of how an ex-Anbu captain chickened out around the shinobi community, or how his self-proclaimed eternal rival bested him in something around Guy. With a heavy sigh, he pulled up the Hitai covering his lone Sharingan and said to Guy while not daring to take his eyes off Wu, "You better take your weights off for this one, Guy." The bowl-cut taijutsu specialist lightly chuckled and said, "No need to obliterate him, Kakashi. We're only trying to teach him a lesson." He charged forward before Kakashi had a chance to explain his warning. "Oh well," Kakashi shrugged, "he'll have to learn the hard way." Nothing's changed. Wu remained where he was, still laughing, and acted as if an approaching green blur did not even exist. When he got 1 meter within Wu, Guy readied himself to open his attack with a sweeping primary lotus kick to Wu's head, aiming for his left temple. 1 centimeter close to the kick connecting, Wu thrust out his left hand, extending his index finger and flicked his chi at 3 of Guy's pressure points around the tibia, femur, and humerus, effectively motion-freezed Guy's flying leg to a screeching halt. The rest of Guy's body, however, was still behind the momentum of the kick and continued the follow-through motions, unable to stop itself from pulling a few muscles and dislocating his hip at his kicking right leg. With that simple flick of a finger, Wu, not having even touched one single hair on Guy's body, was able to not only stop Guy's favorite opening attack, but defeated him as well. Suddenly, Wu swung his sword and sheath out of his back strapping and plunged it into the ground. From his sleeves, he took out an elaborately designed folded-up fan that was an arm's length and balanced it horizontally on the butt of the sword hilt. He said to the silver-haired ninja, "I don't expect you to land a punch on me or even come any closer than your companion did. So all you have to do is tip this gingerly balanced fan off my sword, and I'll admit defeat." Kakashi's mouth hung open. He covered his Hitai-ite over the Sharingan with his right hand and lifted his jaw to shut his mouth with his left. He slowly walked over to Guy and picked him up, carrying him over his shoulder, leaving for the hospital without saying another word. Lamented Wu, "I was hoping for a little more fun to loosen up my joints, oh well." Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.